Chapter 295. The old monk slowly appeared in front of Siochi, his glass-like body radiating light. He slowly raised his right hand, calmly and elegantly. He bent his index finger and gently flicked it. His solemn and holy face revealed a smile. Sioshi was stretching her back. Seeing the old monk, her eyes widened. She opened her mouth to speak, but the old monk flicked his finger, and her heart was instantly shattered. Everything came to an abrupt stop. The world stopped in her eyes. Her eyes slowly closed, and her body fell to the ground, silent. She was dead. Everything seemed slow, but it was so fast that Chuli could not react. The old monk smiled at Chuli again and flicked his index finger. A strange force appeared out of nowhere in Chuli's heart. It was about to explode his heart into pieces. The heavenly demonic energy that had been hiding in his heart suddenly condensed. Like a beast pouncing, it swallowed the force in one gulp. Seeing that he killed Sioshi with one finger, Chuli was furious. He wanted to go forward and chop off his smiling head. He wanted to cut him into pieces. He was furious, but he became calmer. Using the scripture of life and death, he instantly turned from glory to wither. His spiritual energy dissipated, and his body fell like a dead tree. Amitabha! The old monk stood in front of Chuli and chanted the name of Buddha. The name of Buddha was calm and peaceful. It slowly spread out in the sky. Everyone in the horse-racing town heard the name of Buddha. When the name of Buddha entered their ears, their mood became calm and their restlessness disappeared. The two groups of people who were fighting outside the horse-racing town suddenly stopped. The hostility in their hearts mysteriously disappeared. Suddenly, they felt that what they were doing was ridiculous. Without thinking much, they turned and left. Amitabha! The old monk chanted the name of Buddha again. When the name of Buddha entered their ears, everyone's heart became calm and peaceful. The old monk's appearance appeared in their minds. Yu was gazing on the tree. Suddenly, he saw a ray of light shooting into the sky and heard the name of Buddha. He shouted in surprise, "Revered Sir Kong Hai!" He appeared in front of the old monk like a wisp of smoke. Seeing his body like colored glass, solemn and dignified, with a halo behind his head, he widened his eyes and cried out, "Revered Sir Kong Hai!" The old monk turned around and pressed his palms together. His voice was calm and peaceful. "Almsgiver Gu, I have finished my worldly affairs and will return to the temple to cultivate in isolation." Guyu looked at the two people on the ground. Kong Hai revealed a compassionate expression and said kindly, "The two almsgivers have already departed to the west. His Highness King and can be rest assured. I shall take my leave first." "Is Venerable One about to become a Buddha?" Guyu hurriedly asked. Kong Hai sighed. "A monk doesn't lie. I'm just borrowing a strand of the power of Buddha from beyond the heavens. I'm still far from being able to achieve anything. This time, I'll be going into seclusion, hoping to achieve something in this world. Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed his palms together and suddenly disappeared. Guyu's eyes widened. The scene before him made him respect the titanium temple even more. He stood there blankly for a moment before coming back to his senses. He went forward to check on Chuli and Sioshi and smiled. Both of them were dead, and their bodies were stiff. Even if they had miraculous pills, it would be useless. Even the spirit blessing pill from the public house could not save them. He stared at Sioshi. The dead Sioshi was still as beautiful as ever. Her eyes were slightly closed, and her expression was serene. It was as if she had been liberated and was in no pain at all. Guyu sighed. As expected of the Ji dynasty's #1 beauty, he shook his head in his heart. His Royal Highness King, and was too cruel. He loved his country, but not beauties. Although he could get any beauty he wanted as an emperor, it would be hard for him to meet a beauty like Seo Shur, who was hard to come by. For the sake of the throne, King An was willing to be ruthless. He was indeed a man who would achieve great things. However, it was Venerable One Kong Hai who did it himself. If it was him, he would not have been able to be so cruel. Sigh. Guyu shook his head and sighed. He could not bear to leave such a beautiful corpse in the wilderness. It was better to let her rest in peace. He slammed both of his palms, and a huge pit quickly appeared on the ground. He gently placed Seo Shur in the pit. After some thought, he threw Chu Li in as well. It was considered as a meritorious deed. He pushed both of his palms back into the soil and stomped on it. He did not erect a sign and floated away. Chu Li was in a strange state. His body was like a withered tree, no different from death, but his mind was awake. The omniscient mirror was getting clearer and clearer. He saw that Kong Hai's left wrist was missing a bead. As expected, this was the power of the Saraira. Seeing that Guyu had gone far away, he urged the flourishing, withering technique. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged, and the heavenly demonic energy in his chest began to circulate. It was vigorous and vast. He had unknowingly stepped into the second level. It devoured the old monk Kong Hai's finger energy and strengthened itself. It turned out that he had been cultivating the wrong way all this while. The heavenly demonic energy was strengthened by devouring. The cultivation of the heavenly demonic power was to transform the devoured heavenly demonic energy into his own, and not to increase the heavenly demonic energy. He carried Seo Shur out of the mud pit without a sound. It was as easy as coming out of the water. He gently placed Seo Shur on the ground and wiped the mud away from her mouth and nose. He sighed, but he was not in a hurry. He was thinking about the scene where Kong Hai appeared. Kong Hai's state at that moment was too shocking. It was as if he had turned into a Buddha. The formation was forcefully broken by him. Although the power of the formation was not strong, it was shocking enough. The Tempest Temple had this kind of secret skill, and so did the Titanium Temple. They were like the Buddha that descended from the heavens, unparalleled. The heavenly demonic energy circulated in his body and devoured Kong Hai's palm energy in one breath. It then circulated one round in his body and returned to his chest. It lay dormant. The heavenly demonic energy that stepped into the second level was indeed powerful. Unfortunately, it was too weak before. Otherwise, he would not have to suffer. Without the destruction of Kong Hai's palm energy, his body's tyrannical side was fully displayed. He also consumed a spirit blessing pill. With that, he quickly recovered from his injuries. In the next moment, he arrived at the tallest restaurant in the city. There was a metal pole erected outside the restaurant. The flag was fluttering. The 3 words Raging Sand Tower could be seen from any place in the city. Chu Li took out 20,000 taels of silver and booked the entire restaurant. He ordered the people to move the metal pole to a position that was close to the wall within an hour. The restaurant manager hurriedly agreed. 20,000 taels of silver was enough to buy the entire restaurant. He only booked it for a few days. Of course, he made a fortune. He was excited and motivated. According to Chu Li's request, the metal pole was moved within an hour and everyone else was dismissed. Chu Li was already very familiar with the eclipse purloin. The dark clouds quickly gathered in the sky, as if the sky had darkened. The thunder roared, frightening the people of Horse Racing Town. First, there was the descent of the eminent monk, the Dharma of salvation. Then there was the thunder. Could it be to punish the evil? Chu Li stood on the top floor and watched as Seo Shur's shattered heart slowly recovered. He still felt that it was unbelievable. The eclipse proloin technique was miraculous beyond imagination. To be able to recover from such an injury, it was unimaginable. Bolts of thunder were diverted away by the metal pole and could not land on him. Chu Li did not dare to be careless. His body was like a dead tree. He wanted to pretend to be dead to see if he could divert the thunder punishment. Pa! A bolt of lightning bypassed the metal pole and hit the top of his head. He fell on his back and landed heavily on the floor. The heavenly demonic energy circulated desperately, swallowing the lightning. However, it was like a snake swallowing an elephant. It was difficult to swallow. The power of the thunder was purer than Kong Hai's finger energy. Chu Li was not worried. As long as his spirit was not injured, he would not die with the life and death scripture. Xiao Shi slowly opened her eyes. She turned her head and looked around. She slowly sat up. She was sitting on a square table made of 2 dining tables. There was no one beside her. Where was Chu Li? She turned her head and saw Chu Li lying on the floor. She hurriedly reached out her hand to help him up. Her fragrant body trembled as an electric current ran through her body. She fell on the floor. Her black and thick hair straightened as if it was about to explode. Chu Li let out a long sigh and sat up. The life and death scripture was indeed powerful. After a few changes, the power of the thunder was eliminated. He was resurrected from the dead. He had deceived it. Chapter 296. Xiao Shi glared at him. You still have the mood to laugh. Chu Li pointed at her hair and laughed. This is too funny. Xiao Shi tidied her messy hair and said, It's all because of you. Chu Li grabbed her wrist and injected a thin stream of inner energy into her hair. Her hair instantly calmed down and returned to its black and thick color. It hung on her shoulder obediently. Xiao Shi sighed. Chu Li, you've saved me again. Chu Li nodded. Lady won't die so easily. It's been 3 times, Xiao Shi said. I owe you 3 lives. Chu Li smiled. Count it as 2. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes. Why don't I devote myself to you? Chu Li chuckled. Xiao Shi furrowed her brows and stared at him. Chu Li quickly stopped laughing and looked at her with a serious face. Am I that unattractive to you? Xiao Shi scoffed. Aren't you tempted at all when you say devote yourself to me? Chu Li said, I know you like to make people happy. Xiao Shi scoffed. You're different. You've saved me 3 times. It's not a big deal for me to devote myself to you. If you ask me, let's find a quiet place to live. Don't worry about my sister. I don't care about the house of high dukes. Just treat it like we were killed this time. The world is so big. Where can we find a place to stay? Chu Li shook his head. He was very rational. As long as King and was alive, they would not be at peace. You're so boring. Xiao Shi scoffed. No wonder my sister likes you. You two are the same. Chu Li said, Lady, let's go back to the formation. That old monk didn't leave? Xiao Shi frowned. Thinking about the previous scene, she felt a chill down her spine. That old monk laughed like Buddha, but he killed her without hesitation. His personality was so strange that it made people tremble. He has returned to the temple. Chu Li sighed. Old monk Kong Hai seemed to have become a Buddha. She could not even withstand a single blow from him. Even an enlightened master was nothing. Just thinking about it sent chills down her spine. How did you escape? Xiao Shi asked. He probably used the titanium Sarira technique from the titanium temple. He borrowed the Buddhist energy of the Sarira's owner in the outland. He is almost invincible in this world. The owners of the relics. Chu Li frowned. Could it be that the owners of these relics are still alive? You can say that he's dead, but you can also say that he's not dead. Xiao Shi thought for a while and said, These relics were left behind by the eminent monks when they passed away. These eminent monks usually came to this world with their wishes. When their wishes were fulfilled, they would leave, toss aside their mortal bodies, and return to the sky beyond heaven to continue cultivating. The Vajra temple cultivates the 10 lives of Buddhahood. They can still come back. Chuli was shocked. Could it be that his reincarnation into this world was not a special case, and there were others? Xiaoshi replied, "Of course I can come back. I'll cultivate the 10 lifetimes of Buddhahood, and I'll only travel back and forth between this realm and the outland. I won't be reincarnated in the underworld. After cultivating for 10 lifetimes, I'll be able to reach perfection, and I'll be able to step into the Western paradise." Chuli frowned. Xiaoshi said, "But when I came back, I was no longer the same person. The mystery in the womb can't be solved, and the past will be forgotten. Only at the moment of Buddhahood, the memories of the 10 lifetimes will be awakened. If I can let it go, I'll be able to achieve great liberation and achieve Buddhahood and enter the Western paradise." "What about the Tempest Temple?" Chuli asked. Xiaoshi smiled. "You don't even know this? Aren't you from the Temple of Autumn?" "Master didn't tell me about this." Chuli shook his head. Xiaoshi said, "That's true. It'll only add to my worries. Those who can become Buddhahood now are only the Tempest Temple and the Titanium Temple. The Temple of Autumn can't do anything about it." Chuli frowned. "How does the Tempest Temple become Buddhahood?" "They cultivate the instantaneous Buddhahood." Xiaoshi said, "They don't cultivate divine powers, but a treasured raft. The body is a treasured raft to cross the sea of suffering. If they can cultivate their martial arts to the enlightened mastery's boundary, they'll be able to transform into a rainbow and achieve Buddhahood. But the Tempest Temple has absorbed some of the Titanium Temple's cultivation techniques. Some monks also cultivate divine powers. The Titanium Temple has also absorbed some of the Tempest Temple's martial arts. Instantaneous Buddhahood." Chuli muttered. Xiaoshi said, "It's to become Buddhahood in this life. If you don't become Buddhahood, everything will go to waste. There'll be no reincarnation cultivation. Once you step into the underworld, you'll be no different from a mortal." Chuli nodded slowly. The mysteries of this world were far beyond his imagination. It wasn't just about martial arts. He suddenly slapped his forehead. "Let's go into the formation first." He pulled Xiaoshi's sleeves and entered the formation outside the city, like a wisp of smoke. Xiaoshi sat on a rock and blocked the sunlight with her hands. It was noon, and the sun was exceptionally hot. This was the horse racing town's strange weather. "Afraid that the old monk will come back." "I don't think he'll come back." Chuli shook his head. "But we have to be careful. If the old monk doesn't come back, Prince N's men might." Once bitten, twice shy, Xiaoshi pursed her lips and smiled. Chuli glared at her. Xiaoshi smiled. "What's the use of hiding here? As long as the monks from the Titanium Temple don't go crazy and use the Titanium Sarira technique." Chuli scoffed. "Wouldn't there be one less Sarira to use?" "Of course." Xiaoshi said, "How many do you think there are?" Chuli let out a sigh of relief. "That's good. If the Titanium Temple had a lot of Sarira, then he wouldn't have to bother. If he met them, he could just run. He wouldn't be able to defeat them." He taught Xiaoshi the method to exit the formation and had her wait in the formation. He went to the town to buy some daily necessities and food. He decided to stay in the formation for a while. He could use this death to calm Prince N down. Before the wedding, he would appear in the fairy's capital and not give him a chance to make a move. Xiaoshi looked at the things he bought and laughed. "Are we really going to live here?" Chuli nodded seriously. "All right." Xiaoshi looked at his serious expression and reluctantly agreed. For the next few days, Xiao Shi stayed in the formation. Chu Li set up a formation around the surroundings in an attempt to build a bigger formation. This big formation was made up of a few smaller formations. One by one, they formed into a big formation. It was considered a trick, and its power would be stronger. He hoped to be able to block the old monk Kong Hai's titanium Sarira technique. In the evening, the sun was setting. Xiao Shi was reading a book on a deck chair with a red glow around her. She looked relaxed and at ease. Her gaze occasionally shifted from the book to Chu Li, who was busy chopping trees. She smiled. Chu Li suddenly stopped and returned to Xiao Shi's side. Xiao Shi smiled. What is it now? Chu Li pointed to the east. Someone is coming. Is it someone from the imperial residence of Prince? And again, she had a charming smile on her face. Chu Li was unromantic and nodded with a straight face. Xiao Shi frowned, and her smile froze. Is it really the imperial residence of Prince? And Chu Li said, it's an old friend. Gu Yu had a tall and burly figure. His face was like a silver plate, and his beard fluttered in the wind. He and a skinny old man in black clothing arrived at the foot of the mountain. Gu Yu pointed to the middle of the mountain and said to the skinny old man, Brother Ding, he's up there. I buried him personally. Let's go take a look. The skinny old man's face squeezed out a smile. Gu Yu shook his head disapprovingly. Your Royal Highness is too cautious. I've seen it with my own eyes and touched it with my own hands. He can't be more dead than dead. It's better to check it out. The skinny old man said, This time, we'll cut off their heads. Chapter 297. P.S. If you guys don't have any more monthly votes, recommendation votes are also appreciated. Thank you very much. Hee hee, Brother Gu. You're already so old, but your heart is still so young. I'm impressed. The skinny elder smiled and closed fist saluted. Gu Yu waved his hand. No matter how old I am, I'm still a man. Brother Ding, you haven't seen this second lady Xiao. She's indeed the #1 beauty of the great Ji dynasty. She's so beautiful that only Lord Kong Hai could do it. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to kill her. How could it be that unbelievable? The skinny elder shook his head in disbelief. Gu Yu scoffed. Brother Ding, you have to believe me. Second Lady Xiao is a true lady from a wealthy family. Not many people have seen her. How could she be so famous? She's really beautiful. There are many beauties in the fairy's capital. Even in the imperial residence and the palace, there are beauties everywhere. But compared to Second Lady Xiao, they can't compare at all. A person's reputation is like a tree's shadow. It's definitely true. Has the Royal Highness seen Second Lady Xiao? Ding Jian asked. Gu Yu shook his head. I think he hasn't. Oh, Ding Jian asked. Why do you think so? I heard that the Royal Highness saw Second Lady Xiao when he was young. He was still a baby then. I thought about it and felt that the Royal Highness might not have seen the adult Second Lady Xiao. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so cruel. Gu Yu shook his head. The Royal Highness has great ambitions. How could he tolerate love? Ding Jian scoffed. Gu Yu shook his head. For a beauty like Second Lady Xiao, I'm willing to give up my country. Brother Gu, you're really smitten by Second Lady Xiao. Ding Jian shook his head and laughed. You'll know when you see her. Gu Yu scoffed. As they spoke, they arrived at a patch of new soil. Gu Yu pointed and sighed with some melancholy. It's here. No matter what kind of beauty she was, she would still become one in the end. Yellow soil really made people sad. Ding Jian looked at it. Let's dig it. Gu Yu pressed his palms together and mumbled. He asked Second Lady Xiao's spirit in heaven not to be offended. He was just following orders, which made Ding Jian quite disapproving. He felt that he was a coward and did not look like a grandmaster at all. I'll do it, Ding Jian said. He stretched out his hands. His skin immediately stuck to his bones. He was bony and bony like the talons of a golden eagle. His hands turned into 2 claws. Its claws dug down fiercely. The soil was as soft as tofu under his claws. In the blink of an eye, he had already dug a large pit. Ding Jian stood in the pit and dug out as he said, "Brother Gu, you really dug deep." Guyu's expression was solemn. Ding Jian felt that something was amiss. "Look up at him," Guyu said in a low voice. "Brother Ding, he's gone." "Gone." Ding Jian's expression changed slightly. Guyu pointed at Ding Jian's feet. "I've already dug too deep. I didn't dig this deep. Where can he go?" Ding Jian leaped onto the grass, and his face darkened. "There's trouble." "Brother Ding, are you saying that they might still be alive?" Guyu hesitated. His heart was strangely relieved. Xioshi's beautiful face flashed in front of his eyes. If such a beauty could come back to life, it would be a blessing. Ding Jian asked, "Someone save them?" Guyu shook his head. "I stood guard here for 2 days and 2 nights. No one came." At that time, Kong Hai the Revered One chased after Chu Li for 2 days and 2 nights. In the end, he killed 2 people here. Kong Hai the Revered One transformed into a Buddha. After killing them, Kong Hai the Revered One returned to the Titanium Temple. I buried the 2 people and examined them carefully. Their bodies were stiff. Even a spirit blessing pill couldn't save them. No one saved them. They're completely dead. How did they disappear? Ding Jian scoffed. He looked deeply at Guyu with suspicion. Guyu immediately understood his gaze. He frowned and said, "Brother Ding, you suspect that I'm behind this? I don't want anything else. I just want to cut off their heads and present it to His Royal Highness." Ding Jian said, "Brother Ding, you must be thinking that I saved them, right?" Guyu said coldly. He stroked his snowy beard and squinted his eyes. "I don't care about the life and death of Feng Huang Mountain. Save a dead person? All right. Brother Gu, of course I don't think so." Ding Jian squeezed out a smile. "No matter how foolish you are, you wouldn't do such a thing." "But where did they go?" "That's easy," Guyu said coldly. "Ask the Revered One Kong Hai to make a move again. Use the all-seeing divine power, and we'll know." "Makes sense." Ding Jian nodded. "Unfortunately, Kong Hai the Revered One has already returned to the temple. Why don't we make a trip to the Titanium Temple? Let's go." Guyu scoffed. "It's just that Kong Hai the Revered One said he's going into isolated cultivation. I'm not sure if we can get him to help." Ding Jian looked at him. His suspicions grew. "Isolated cultivation?" Guyu said. "Kong Hai the Revered One had some enlightenment. He might become a Buddha." He. Ding Jian's smile became more and more incorporeal. "That's too much of a coincidence. Isolated cultivation. Let's go. We'll ask Kong Hai the Revered One." Guyu scoffed angrily. The 2 of them turned and left the mountainside. Xioshi looked at Chu Li. "We can't pretend to be dead anymore." She originally hoped that once she died, Princeton would give up and stop tormenting them. She never thought that Prince would be so careful. He even wanted to check again. Once the matter was exposed, it meant that their peaceful days were over. Xioshi asked, "Change the location?" Chu Li shook his head. "There's no rush. Are we waiting for them to find us? If the old monk comes again, we won't be so lucky," Xioshi said. Chu Li smiled. The Titanium Temple was a temple on the mountainside. It was hard to imagine that such a simple and unadorned temple was one of the 4 major sects, the Titanium Temple. Guyu and Ding Jian came to the front of the Titanium Temple. They knocked on the tightly shut door. The color of the door faded. There were only a few pieces of red paint left. After a while, an old monk with a face full of age spots opened the door. His movements were hesitant and difficult. It made people worry if he had the strength to take the next step. Yu pressed his palms together. Greetings, revered one. We are here to pay our respects to revered one Kong Hai. Kong Hai? The old monk's eyes were cloudy. He asked slowly, "Who is Kong Hai?" Yu said seriously, "Revered one Kong Hai just returned to the temple a few days ago. He said he wanted to go into isolated cultivation. We have important matters to attend to, so we can only disturb revered one Kong Hai's isolated cultivation. We hope that revered one will make things convenient for us." "Oh." The old monk nodded slowly. "I will go and see if there is a person named Kong Hai." "Thank you, revered one." Yu pressed his palms together. The old monk closed the temple door again. His slow footsteps gradually faded away. Ding Jian looked at the titanium temple. He frowned at Yu. Yu smiled. "Brother Ding, do you think we came to the wrong place? Is this really the titanium temple?" Ding Jian asked. There were cracks on the temple's walls. It looked like it would collapse at any time. It looked like it was caused by poor management. It should have been repaired a long time ago. Yu said, "Brother Ding, the titanium temple is different from the Tempest temple. You will know in the future." Ding Jian shook his head. "I would like to see it for myself." He thought of the old monk. "But isn't it too difficult to have such an old man guard the door? There must be a deeper meaning." Yu said. The two did not see anything special about the old monk. He was just an old monk. He was not a master. After a while, the old monk opened the door and let them in. "Go straight and turn left. The second room is Kong Hai's." "Thank you, revered one," Yu hurriedly said. The two entered the courtyard. Chapter 298. Both of them looked at the young novice monks. Their eyes were bright, showing their extraordinary intelligence. They came to a house pointed out by the old monk. The house was not big. The paint on the door was peeling, and it was old and broken. The door gap was wide and could not block the wind at all. Just as they were about to knock, the door opened by itself. "Revered Sir Kong," Hai walked out and smiled. "Almsgiver Gu, this almsgiver." "Revered sir, this is Brother Ding Jian." Yu bowed. "We are here to ask revered sir for advice." Kong Hai smiled and invited the two to sit in the house. The house was decorated very simply. There was a table under the window in front of the Kong bed, a chair and a stool in front of the table. There was a bookshelf against the wall filled with old books. Kong Hai sat cross-legged on the Kong bed and invited the two to sit. "Revered sir, we went to see Second Lady Xiao and Chu Li's corpses and found that they were gone." Yu knew that Kong Hai did not like small talk and went straight to the point. "We suspect that they are not dead." Kong Hai's calm face showed a complicated expression. "Sigh." Kong Hai put his palms together. "Amitabha, revered sir," Yu said, "I would like to ask revered sir to use your divine power again and use the all-seeing eye to check." Kong Hai sighed. "This matter is already over. Why stir up trouble again? His Highness will not be at ease without seeing Second Lady Zhao's corpse." Yu said helplessly. "If I knew this would happen, I would have brought Second Lady Xiao back to the residence. Under the flower-pinching finger, there is no chance of survival." Kong Hai sighed. "My sins have increased again. What a pity," Yu said. "After revered sir left, I buried them. When I went again, they were already gone. Of course, under the revered sir's flower-pinching finger, there is no chance of survival. I'm just afraid that they have some secret skill that can bring the dead back to life." "Bring the dead back to life." Kong Hai muttered. As a Buddhist, revered sir, he was familiar with this kind of special skill. Has there been any phenomenon? Kong Hai asked. Guyu thought about it. He quickly nodded. I heard about it in the city. Not long after revered sir became a Buddha, the sky was filled with dark clouds and thunder. Breaking through the tallest building in the city, the Wild Sand Building. I heard the news when I was eating with Brother Ding. They were having a meal at the Wild Sand restaurant in Horse Racing Town. As grandmasters, it was only natural for them to go to the best restaurant. While they were eating, they overheard the conversation casually. Initially, he thought that it was just an exaggeration, so he didn't pay much attention to it. If that's the case, then let this old monk take a look. Kong Hai's snow-white brows furrowed. He opened a cupboard under the bookshelf and took out a box from it. There were a few strands of hair in the box. Kong Hai took out a strand of her hair and sat cross-legged on the Kong. Her appearance was solemn and dignified. The strand of hair was wrapped around the tip of her left index finger, motionless. After a long while, he slowly opened his eyes. He looked pensive. How is it, Venerable One? Guyu asked hurriedly. Kong Hai's brows were tightly furrowed as she gently shook her head. Second Miss Xiao didn't die? Guyu asked again. Or is she already dead? You can see that, right? I can't tell, Kong Hai said. There's an invisible force blocking the all-seeing heaven and earth. He recalled Chu Li's formation. Is Second Miss Xiao really dead? Guyu sighed. Kong Hai pondered in silence. Ding Jian said, Venerable One, if you can't tell where she is, can't you tell if she's dead or alive? He felt that it shouldn't be too difficult. Guyu looked at Kong Hai. Venerable One, there must be a way, right? Your temple has so many divine powers. How can you not tell if someone is dead or alive? Sigh. Kong Hai sighed. His brows furrowed even more. He shook his head with a sad face, got off the Kong, and went to the door. Su Ling, invite your master's Junior Kong Jing over. Yes, master. A young novice monk who was playing beside the pagoda answered and ran away. Kong Hai sat back on the Kong. My Junior Kong Jing has the heaven's eye. Thank you, Venerable One Kong Hai. Guyu hurriedly smiled. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have been so careless. Everything is predetermined. Kong Hai shook his head and said, You reap what you sow. Almsgiver Gu, you don't have to blame yourself. As they spoke, an extremely old monk slowly walked in and bowed with pressed palms. Senior Kong Hai. He was thin, slightly hunched, and wore a faded yellow monk robe, revealing gray. Junior Kong Jing. Kong Hai waved his hand. He gestured for him to sit on the Kong. There's something I need your help with. The old and hunched Kong Jing slowly came to the Kong and sat down. What's the matter, senior brother? Junior brother, please help me see if this person is dead or alive. Kong Hai handed over a strand of hair. You don't have to look too much. Kong Jing took the strand of hair. A smile appeared on his wrinkled face. It's a female almsgiver. Kong Hai nodded. Kong Jing put his palms together, holding the strand of hair between his palms. He closed his eyes, looking solemn and sacred. Guyu and Ding Jian suddenly felt like they had woken up from a dream. Kong Jing's forehead was slightly lowered, as if he was using his forehead to stare at the strand of hair. Uffed. Kong Jing raised his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. Kong Hai reached out to support him and sighed. Thank you, junior brother. Kong Jing struggled to sit up and returned the strand of hair with both hands, not saying a word. Almsgiver Co seems to be an extraordinary person. Kong Hai looked at the strand of hair with a complicated expression. For an ordinary person, a glance at their fate and future would cause karma and karmic backlash to be insignificant. However, if one person's fate affected everyone's fate, a glance with the heavens I would cause karma and karmic backlash to be much stronger. Seeing his junior brother spitting out a mouthful of blood, Seoshur was no ordinary woman. Guyu asked carefully, "Honorable Kong Jing?" Ding Jian looked at the old face without blinking. He felt as if he had aged a lot and was about to die. Kong Jing sighed. Motherly model of the world, unspeakably noble. Motherly model of the world. Guyu cried out involuntarily. Could it be the Empress? Kong Jing shook his head and did not say anything else. He bowed to Kong Hai with his palms together. Senior brother, I'll take my leave. Junior brother, take good care of your body. Kong Hai bowed with his palms together. Kong Jing smiled and slowly walked away. Guyu hurriedly said, "Honorable Kong Jing, speak clearly." Kong Jing stood at the door and turned around with a smile. This noble is still alive and will be the motherly model of the world in the future. I will take my leave now. He bowed with his palms together and slowly left. How is that possible? Guyu turned around to look at Ding Jian. Ding Jian's expression changed as well. Guyu then looked at Kong Hai. Kong Hai frowned and sighed. Junior brother Kong Jing's heavens, I would not be wrong. And junior brother Kong Jing would not lie. It seems that almsgiver Seo is still alive. To be able to survive the flower-pinching finger. What an anomaly! Honorable sir, we need to see His Highness immediately. Guyu hurriedly said, "Will you come with us?" Kong Hai shook his head. "I will not leave the temple." Ah! Guyu was shocked. Kong Hai said, "I will pass away in 7 days." Honorable sir, you are in good spirits, and your body is strong. How? Guyu was doubtful. Kong Hai said, "My fate in the mortal world is over. I can finally leave." Honorable sir. Guyu was puzzled. Kong Hai smiled. There is only joy in returning to the outland after passing away. Almsgiver Gu need not feel this way. Then can I come and see you one last time? Chapter 299. P.S. Once again, I would like to thank everyone for their support. Subscriptions, gifts, monthly tickets, recommendation tickets. All of them are very important to me. Thank you. The two of them bade farewell and left the Titanium Temple. Both of them were filled with worries as they slowly walked down the mountain without speaking. Both of them were thinking about the same question. Should they report this matter to His Highness? The Royal Highness was determined to eradicate Second Lady Xiao. He was afraid that she and the public house would become an obstacle to his succession to the throne. So, he sent many masters to kill her. But now, he suddenly told King and that Second Lady Xiao was destined to be the Empress. What he did previously was a huge mistake. Where would King An put his face? The most important thing for the members of the royal family was their reputation. If he were prince, and he would also feel awkward. He would not have a good impression of the person who told him the news. He would hate him and think of a way to get even with him in the future. As King An, it would be difficult for him to deal with this news. He was a prince. Was he supposed to apologize to Second Lady Xiao? He had really sent an expert to kill her, and he had killed her. However, for some unknown reason, she had come back to life. This was a true enmity. Even if he apologized, what was the use? Ding Jian thought for a while and asked in confusion, "Brother Gu, why would the Titanium Temple serve His Highness?" He did not find it strange before, but after seeing the Titanium Temple, he was puzzled. The Titanium Temple was so indifferent and did not care about material things. It was hard to imagine that they would kill for King, and Guyu said, "How can ordinary people like us see through the actions of these eminent monks?" With the eye of the sky, could it be that he saw that King and was fated to be King and Ding Jian's spirits were lifted? Guyu slowly nodded. It's very possible. He shook his head again. Actually, it made no difference to the titanium temple who the emperor was. The titanium temple was different from the Tempest temple. The disciples of the titanium temple rarely left the temple and stood aloof from worldly affairs. They did not have to care who the emperor was or what dynasty it was. In the end, Guyu waved her hand. Forget it, forget it. I won't be able to figure it out, no matter how hard I try. Let's just talk about this. Should we report this to His Highness? Just say it, Ding Jian said helplessly. Fairy's capital, King An's imperial residence, main study room. A few palace lanterns were hung high in the study, making it look as bright as day. Prince An was dressed in a bright yellow robe. He stood in front of the two of them, with his hands behind his back, not saying a word. He turned his head to look at a young monk not far away. Su Ning, the young monk, wore a yellow monk robe. He was plump and looked honest, as if anyone could bully him. He did not look like an eminent monk at all. He put his palms together and bowed. Your Highness, Martial Uncle Kongjing is the #1 person in our temple with the heavenly eye divine ability. This divine power consumes too much of one's lifespan. All these years, Martial Uncle Kongjing has almost never used this divine power. If it wasn't for Martial Uncle Kong, Martial Uncle Kongjing wouldn't have used it. So what you're saying is true? Prince An's handsome face tensed up. Martial Aunt Kongjing would never lie. Su Ning pressed his palms together and said, Congratulations, Your Highness. The motherly model of the world. What a good motherly model of the world. King An's handsome face revealed a smile. He shook his head and sighed. His smile was helpless and bitter. He quickly collected his emotions and glanced at Guyu and Ding Jian. Don't tell anyone about this. Don't blame this king for being heartless. Yes. Guyu and Ding Jian hurriedly replied. They were responsible for the sect's heavy responsibilities. If they really offended King An, the sect would be implicated. Hearing this news, they were even more convinced that King An would be able to take the throne and become the emperor in the future. The sect would definitely receive endless benefits. Your Highness, do you want to tell the princess? Apologize and say that it's a misunderstanding. Guyu looked at him carefully. Princess? King An was stunned. Then he came to a realization and stared at him. Old Gu, you're quite clever. Your mind is quite clever. She isn't even a princess yet. She'll be in a month. As long as Your Highness doesn't regret it, the House of High Dukes will not regret it. Guyu laughed. King An smiled. He paced with his hands behind his back, his bright yellow robe dazzling under the light. After a few steps, he shook his head and said, Forget it, don't say anything. Your Highness, you're not going to explain? Guyu was surprised. Your Highness, I've seen the princess's real face. She's really beautiful. Is she really that beautiful? King An disagreed. Guyu raised his left palm. If I speak a single lie, may I be struck by lightning. I'll believe you for now. King An waved his hand. He was not that obsessed with women. What he cared about was the throne. There's no rush. There's still a long way to go. Should we tell the House of High Dukes? Just in case the House of High Dukes overreacted. If there were any more twists and turns, it would affect the progress of the wedding. That wouldn't be good. There's no need to say more. Rin Public House is also making a ruckus. If they let their guard down, Lu Yurong will take advantage of them. King An muttered. Lu Yurong. Guyu and Ding Jian looked at each other. Their faces were gloomy. Last time, they suffered a huge loss from Lu Yurong. They almost lost their lives. Even King An's precious body was injured. This woman's martial arts was strange. Her intelligence was extraordinary. She was really scary. Forget it. We won't deal with her anymore. King An said lightly, That Chu Li is good at dealing with Lu Yurong. Let them fight it out. We'll just watch the show. Your Highness, I'm afraid that the princess, Guyu quickly said. I've sent so many masters, but they can't do anything to her. The Ren public house can't do anything either. King clasped his hands behind his back. Unless Lu Yurong makes a move herself. Lu Yurong might really make a move. Ding Jian said. We'll talk about it then. King said. Yes. The two closed fist saluted and left. Early in the morning, on the mountain peak outside of horse racing town, Chu Li slowly practiced the heavenly demonic power. His movements were slow and clumsy. Xiao Shi was practicing a life-preserving fist technique. It was soft and slow, just like the Taiji fist of the future. A pair of white, jade-like palms seemed to be stirring water. It was soft and powerless, yet smooth and natural. She glanced at Chu Li from time to time. Chu Li was fully focused on his body. He was pondering the heavenly demonic power. Xiao Shi was at ease. She was not nervous at all. She was fearless. If she died, then so be it. If Chu Li could not save her, then she would die too. With the two of them as companions, she would not be lonely on the road to hell. There was nothing wrong with that. Chu Li suddenly realized that the heavenly demonic energy did not need to follow the meridians. Inner energy was like water. It needed to flow in the meridians. If it did not go through the meridians, it could go through the body directly. However, it would hurt the body. The heavenly demonic energy was different. It could go anywhere in the body. At first glance, it was similar to the 5 grains essence. It did not harm the body wherever it went. However, in terms of power, the 5 grains essence was like clouds and mud. They could not be compared. The heavenly demonic energy strengthened itself through devouring. He also realized that the heavenly demonic energy would speed up his moves. It would make his body faster. Compared to his own inner energy, the heavenly demonic energy had a huge advantage. Although the heavenly demonic power was good, he did not dare to use it easily. The heavenly demonic power was said to be the public enemy of Buddhism. Although it had been lost for 100 years, he did not dare to bet that the disciples of Buddhism would not recognize it. If they recognized it, the Tempest Temple and the Titanium Temple would attack together. He would definitely die. He had seen the power of the Tempest Temple and the Titanium Temple. He now understood that the heavenly demonic energy was hiding and could not appear in the world. The heavenly demonic power could only be used to change one's appearance. It could not be used against the enemy. Is it Yang Su? Xiao Shi suddenly said. Chu Li activated the omniscient mirror. He saw Yang Su under the protection of 8 protectors. She rode a horse and slowly passed the foot of the mountain. She's here for us, right? Xiao Shi asked. Chu Li nodded. He disappeared from the spot and appeared on the opposite peak. He stepped on the treetops and glided down. Yang Su saw him from afar. She was overjoyed. Chief. Chu Li approached her. The 8 protectors blocked Yang Su behind them. They had their hands on the hilt of their swords and stared at him. Yang Su quickly said, She's one of us. The 8 protectors took a step back. Yang Su approached Chu Li. Chief, there's a letter. Chapter 300. P.S. I'm sorry, the network is down. The entire town is disconnected from the internet. After much effort and a long journey, I can finally upload it. I don't know when I can upload it in the afternoon. I don't know if it can be fixed. The efficiency of the countryside is really bad. Chu Li took the letter and tore it open. It was a letter from Xueling. In the letter, Xueling said that there was a Guyu in the imperial residence of King, and she secretly sent a message saying that King and would not make a move on the second lady. Instead, she had to be careful of the Run public house in case something happened and the wedding was ruined. She had already looked up information about this Guyu. She was a grandmaster from Feng Huang Mountain. Chu Li kept the letter in his arms and pondered. "Chief, is the lady all right?" Yang Su asked. Chu Li smiled. "She's fine." "Why don't I come over and take care of the lady?" Yang Su asked. Chu Li said, "It's very troublesome here. You have to leave immediately. You can't stay for long." "Yes." Yang Su nodded lightly. Chu Li saw that she was a little reluctant. He secretly thought that she was a worrywart. He said, "The imperial residence of King and the Ren public house are eyeing us. You have to leave before they send people over." "They will catch me?" Chu Li said. "Even if we don't know the second lady's whereabouts, asking about her daily habits is also a useful clue." Yes, Yang Su knew that since the chief had already made arrangements, it was useless for her to say anything. Chu Li turned his head and looked at the crowd. "Let them all go back." Yang Su curtsied to a middle-aged man. "Brother Sang, thank you for taking care of me." The middle-aged man quickly waved his hand and closed fist saluted. "Sister Yang, let's go back first. If there's anything, just call me." "Yes." Yang Su smiled. Looking at them leave, Yang Su said, "Chief, I'll leave directly, right?" Chu Li nodded. "Just in case something happens." He reached out and grabbed Yang Su before disappearing. The next moment, he appeared in front of Jiang Kuai. Jiang Kuai had now transformed into a rough man. He rode 2 tall horses with a long knife on his waist. He had the demeanor of a martial arts hero. Jiang Kuai was about to enter the town. Suddenly, he saw Chu Li appear and closed fist saluted. Chu Li said, "Brother Jiang, it's been a long journey. Bring Miss Yang back. It's best to be safe. It's okay to take some detours." "Take." Jiang Kuai laughed. "Then let's go, Miss Yang." Yang Su hesitated. Chu Li said, "Someone will send your baggage back. You should leave immediately." "Yes." Yang Su curtsied. Chu Li closed fist saluted Jiang Kuai. Jiang Kuai smiled. "Chief, don't worry. I'll be careful." Chu Li nodded. Jiang Kuai was also a veteran in Jianghu. For so many years, no one had been able to catch him. His stealth ability was extremely high. Sio sure saw that he had returned and was practicing her fists. She asked lazily, "What news is there now?" Chu Li told her about Shue's letter. "King and isn't going to kill me." Xiaoshi scoffed. "Why?" "There must be a reason why Guyu said that." Chu Li muttered. "The problem must be with the Titanium Temple." They watched as Guyu and the skinny old man left for the Vajra temples when Kong Si, the Titanium Temple, must have said something to them. Otherwise, they would have sent a large number of masters to search for them. "I want to meet this Guyu," Chu Li said. Xiaoshi glared at him. "You want to walk right into my trap? Are you tired of living?" Chu Li said, "I have to clarify this matter." "What if it's a trap? Kingen wants to kill me, and you too," Xiaoshi said. "I'll go there secretly," Chu Li said. Xiaoshi frowned. "You want to go back to the fairies' capital? How about we go back to Qingyun town?" Chu Li smiled. Xiaoshi stared at him with her watery eyes. "Are you serious?" "Of course," Chu Li said. Yang Baoshu returned home full of energy and vigor. Just as he was about to cultivate in the courtyard, he suddenly felt that something was amiss. He looked to his left, and right before he leaped onto the wall, he saw Chu Li standing in the courtyard on the west side, dressed in a white robe. He had been repeating this action for the past few days. He would occasionally come over to have a look as he felt that Mr. Chu would appear again. "Mr. Chu." Yang Baoshu was overjoyed. Chu Li smiled and waved his hand. Yang Baoshu landed on the ground with a bang and went to Chu Li. "Mr. Chu, I thought you weren't coming back." Chu Li smiled. No one came after that, right? No. Yang Baoshu shook his head. Chu Li nodded. That's good. I can see that your martial arts has improved. Congratulations. Yang Baoshu could leap onto the wall. Although the landing was too loud, it was a huge improvement. Yang Baoshu was instantly excited. It's all thanks to Mr. Chu's guidance that the inner energy of the agile monkey fist is very powerful. My inner energy is improving by leaps and bounds every day. Chu Li smiled and nodded. He had been practicing the agile monkey fist since he was young and had accumulated a lot of experience. Now that he was practicing the heart technique of inner energy, he had accumulated a lot of experience. Mr. Chu, is there anything you need? I'm now the leader of the 10 people. I can get some information, Yang Baoshu said. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. Thank you, I'm just here for some peace. That's great. It's the quietest here. No one will disturb you. Yang Baoshu smiled. Chu Li nodded. Yang Baoshu said knowingly, Mr. Chu, you haven't had dinner, right? I'll ask my mother to cook. Thank you very much. Chu Li did not hesitate. As they were talking, Seo Shi came out from the house. She was wearing a bluish-white gown. Her face was crystal clear and warm. Yang Baoshu felt that the courtyard was suddenly lit up. He quickly turned his head away and did not dare to look. He blushed and said goodbye to Chu Li. Chu Li smiled as he sent him off. Seo Shi shook her head. This young man is quite enthusiastic. It was late at night. Guyu was cultivating in the courtyard. There were no lights in the courtyard. It was pitch black. Guyu's movements were silent. His body was like a ghost. He suddenly stopped and asked in a low voice, Who is it? Chu Li revealed himself and closed fist saluted. I'm Chu Li. I'm here to see Senior Gu under the orders of the second lady. Chu Li. Guyu was stunned. He looked at Chu Li and said, Let's talk inside. Without the protection of the Saraira on Monk Kong Hai's wrist, Chu Li could see Guyu's thoughts. Although there was a hint of hostility, there was no killing intent. The lights in the house were bright. Guyu wiped the sweat off his forehead and gestured for Chu Li to sit. There are too many people. I won't serve tea. Guyu sat on the armchair. Chu Li said, The second lady received Senior Gu's letter. Guyu nodded. I won't admit that I wrote the letter. Chu Li said, The second lady will remember Senior Gu's favor. He peeked into Guyu's heart. Guyu did not care about him, but he cared about Seo Shi. She was the mother of the nation. She was noble beyond words. He thought of ways to curry favor with her. Guyu smiled. Princess, you're being too serious. It's just a small matter. Chu Li said, Why did Prince suddenly change his mind? The second lady will feel uneasy if we don't know. Guyu sighed. His Highness's mind is hard to predict. Even we, who run errands, can't figure it out. I did mention that the princess's beauty is unparalleled. His Highness is also in the prime of his life. Chu Li nodded. I see. I'll go back and report to the second lady. Does Senior Gu know about the Run public house? He sighed to himself. None of them were stupid. Guyu's face darkened. He looked serious. The princess must be careful of Lu Yurong. Her mind is hard to predict. Her martial arts is strong. The average grandmaster can't compare to her. Chu Li said, How many grandmasters does the Run public house have? Around 12. Guyu said, The scariest one is not them. It's Lu Yurong. His Highness suffered a loss. Chu Li nodded. Kong Hai will pass away in 4 days. Yes. Guyu sighed. Revered Sir Kong Hai's divine powers are awe-inspiring. Unfortunately, Chapter 301. Attend the ceremony. Guyu was shocked and sized him up. Chief Chu, you want to go to the Titanium Temple? Chu Li nodded slowly. He saw the titanium temple that Guyu saw in his mind and was shocked. He knew that this decision was no different from suicide. There were many divine powers in the titanium temple. Once he stepped in, he wouldn't be able to escape and would die in the titanium temple. But Chu Li still decided to go. What was 10 lives of Buddhism? More importantly, he wanted to see if he had the chance to cultivate other divine powers. If he could cultivate the omniscient mirror divine power, he might be able to cultivate other divine powers. If he could not reach the enlightened mastery's boundary, his life would be meaningless. With the life and death scripture, it would not be easy for him to die. Moreover, he was reincarnated. Even if he died, he might be able to enter the next life. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. For the divine powers, he decided to take a gamble. Most importantly, he felt that if the titanium temple really wanted to kill him, he wouldn't be able to escape. If Kong Hai used the titanium Sarira technique again, he would definitely die. He might as well send himself to them and see if they would kill him. Aren't you afraid that revered Sir Kong Hai will kill you again? Guyu smiled. Chu Li said, I'm going to the titanium temple to attend the ceremony. They won't kill me, right? That's true. Guyu nodded. If it's not against the titanium temple, the revered sir wouldn't kill anyone in the temple. All right, since Chief Chu dares to go, I dare to agree. Chief Chu is indeed a genius. I admire you. He knew that if it was Chu Li, he wouldn't have the guts. He didn't know if he was arrogant or stupid. He wanted to see what would happen to him. He laughed coldly to himself, but didn't show it on his face. He had an invisible hostility towards Chu Li. He didn't notice it, but Chu Li could see it clearly. Chu Li was amused. He had underestimated Xiao Shi's beauty. Even a man of Guyu's age was affected. He would be jealous and hostile because he was too close to Xiao Shi. When are we leaving? Chu Li asked. Second lady, shall we go together? Guyu stared at Chu Li. Chu Li pondered. He nodded slowly. If the titanium temple still wanted to kill the second lady, they wouldn't be able to escape. I'm afraid that Wang Fei cannot enter the temple. Guyu frowned. But she can wait outside the temple. He was secretly excited. He could not wait to see Xiao Shi. Chu Li nodded. Thank you, Senior Gu. We'll leave tomorrow. Guyu said. Chu Li closed fist saluted. Then I shall take my leave. See you outside the city tomorrow. All right, I won't be sending you off. Guyu cupped his fists. When Chu Li told her his decision, Xiao Shi's eyes widened in surprise. Chu Li asked, Does the lady not want to go? I think you're getting more and more suicidal. Xiao Shi sighed. You're changing your tricks. Chu Li asked, Are you going? Fine, my life is yours anyway. Do as you please. Xiao Shi said, What's there to see about those old monks? I want to see the 10 lifetimes of Dharma, of enlightenment, and divine abilities. So it's greed. Xiao Shi saw through his thoughts and smiled. You want to get some benefits. Her sweet smile was like 100 flowers blooming, her appearance dazzling. Chu Li smiled. Xiao Shi was becoming more and more casual in front of him. Xiao Shi said, All right, since there are benefits, then let's go. That Guyu wants to do you a favor. He believes that the lady will become a princess and eventually become the empress. Chu Li smiled. The old monk in the titanium temple used the heaven's eye and saw your destiny. It's the motherly model of the nation. This is the reason why King N changed his mind. Motherly model of the nation. Xiao Shi frowned. It can't be the empress, right? Chu Li said, The empress and empress dowager are both motherly models of the nation. Who knows? Xiao Shi stared at him. Chu Li, do you really want me to be a princess? King N's woman. Chu Li said calmly, I want to kill King N, but it's very difficult. He felt that it was too much for him. Her tone was bitter, as if she was in love with him and liked to tease him more and more. "It's easier to kill him when he doesn't want to kill me," Seosher scoffed. "I don't want to see this guy. Humph, he kills whenever he wants and marries whenever he wants. He really thinks he's the emperor." Chuli said, "I'll try." Seosher rolled her eyes at him. Chuli's desire to kill King and grew stronger. He wanted to marry Seosher, but not kill her. He also wanted to ascend the throne. What King was going to do next was obvious. It was easy to guess. He was going to attack the High Duke's public house. As long as the public house was around, he would never ascend the throne. So the first thing he would do was to eliminate the public house. If he married Seosher, it would be easier to confuse people. The public house would not even guard against him. Even if they did, they might not be able to. If King was not eliminated, the public house would not be able to escape. Seochi was still in isolated cultivation. No one knew when she would be able to step into the enlightened mastery's boundary. But so what? By the time she came out, the High Duke's public house would have collapsed. Everything was set in stone. Even an enlightened master would not be able to turn the situation around. When that time came, Seochi would probably risk her life. The emperor was also an enlightened master, and he had been an enlightened master for a long time. How could he let Seochi live? After thinking about it, it was better to eliminate King first. Of course, he would not tell Seosher about his far-reaching thoughts. It would only disturb her heart, and it would not help the situation. Seosher suddenly laughed. Chuli looked at her. Seosher smiled and said, "Chuli, don't you think we look like a pair of adulterous husband and wife? We haven't even married yet, and we're already plotting to kill our husband." Chuli said snappily, "Isn't it all because of you? Seems like you like me a little." Seosher smiled and said. Chuli sighed, "My lady, please be more reserved. Don't let others see you as a joke. It's not good for a family. There's no one else." Seosher smiled and said. After being saved by him 3 times, Seosher had completely let down her guard against him. She laughed and scolded him as she pleased. It was the most relaxing. Outside the fairy's capital, Chuli and Seosher stood quietly by the road. She wore a loose purple robe that covered her graceful figure. Her face was covered with a veil, revealing only a pair of beautiful eyes. Guyu strode over. He wore a purple robe and had a graceful bearing. When he saw Chuli, he took a look at Seosher and quickly closed fist saluted. Seosher's bright eyes moved. She glanced at him and nodded lightly. Guyu felt his body lighten under her clear gaze. He quickly said, "Greetings, princess." "Let's go," Seosher said coldly. Guyu quickly nodded. Li was laughing on the side. Everything had its nemesis. Guyu was full of himself in front of him and acted like a senior. But in front of Seosher, he almost bowed down. It wasn't just because of her identity as a princess, but also because of her unparalleled beauty. Li closed fist saluted. "My lady, let's go." "Yes," Seosher said coldly. With someone else around, she suddenly changed into a different person. She no longer had the carefree and lazy attitude she had when she was alone with Li. Guyu did not feel offended at all. Instead, he felt that a princess should be cold and aloof. He laughed and said, "Then I will lead the way for the princess." He turned to look at Li. "Can you keep up?" Li nodded. Seosher glared at Guyu impatiently. Guyu was stunned. Without another word, he used his light body technique and floated away. He left the main road and walked on the grass and trees. Seeing Li holding onto Seosher's wrist, even though it was separated by a sleeve, it still made him jealous. His speed was getting faster and faster. Finally, his light body technique was pushed to its limit. His light body technique was top-notch. Otherwise, he would not have chased after Chu Li with Kong Hai. Chapter 3:02. P.S. If you don't have monthly votes, recommendation votes are also good. Haha, tips are even better. That's an affirmation of me. I'm looking forward to everyone's support. I take back what I said this morning. The efficiency of the villagers is very high. They fixed the network in one morning. Guyu was secretly angry, but also shocked. No wonder when King En sent them, he reminded them to be careful of Chu Li's light body technique. He had thought that his light body technique was good enough for him to dominate the martial arts world. He did not expect Chu Li to be on par with him at such a young age. He did not use any secret arts to stimulate his potential. Otherwise, his speed would have doubled. He still had some sense left in him. If he really did this, after stimulating his potential, he would have to rest for a day. If the princess saw this, wouldn't she laugh her head off? More importantly, he had activated his secret technique, and Chu Li had also activated it. If he still lagged behind, he would be utterly humiliated. There was nothing wrong with leaving some leeway. Xiao Shi looked at the scenery outside. Her fragrant body slowly softened. Almost all of her weight was on his hand. She squinted her eyes. Chu Li used his inner energy to block the wind. It was as if there was a windshield in front of her. The strong wind turned into a gentle breeze, fluttering her sleeves. She was like a speck of dust floating on the waves, fluttering in the breeze. Guyu would steal glances at her from time to time. Guyu felt that his willpower was extraordinary to be able to stop himself from turning his head. Guyu activated his Qing Gong with all his might. His speed was astonishing, even faster than a galloping horse. In the blink of an eye, he was already a mile away. The Vajra Temple was located to the west of the godly capital, about 2,000 miles away. The two of them arrived at the Vajra Temple in the evening. Xiao Shi had already taken 2 naps. She slowly woke up and opened her eyes. She stretched, revealing her stunning curves. "Not here yet." "Princess, we've arrived," Guyu respectfully replied. Xiao Shi stood outside the Temple of Titanium and sized up the old temple. Her eyes flashed. "This is the Temple of Titanium?" "Princess, I also found it strange when I first arrived. I didn't expect the Titanium Temple to be like this." Guyu smiled and said, "I've seen the great Thunderclap Temple before. It's dignified, sacred, and resplendent. It's truly a noble Buddhist temple. This place, on the other hand, seems like a village temple." Xiao Shi said, "Their dharma is different. Can I go in?" "I'll go ask first," Guyu hurriedly said. He stepped forward and opened the temple door. An intelligent novice monk opened the door and looked at him curiously. Then he looked at Chu Li and Xiao Shi. "Which one of you is benefactor, Xiao?" asked the novice monk. Xiao Shi said, "Little monk, my surname is Xiao." "She is indeed a lady almsgiver." The young novice monk put his palms together with a smile and said loudly, "Uncle Kong Hai invites the 3 of you." "Kong Hai is easy to talk to now." Xiao Shi scoffed. Chu Li smiled. "It's good enough that we're able to enter." Xiao Shi's face darkened. "Thank you, little monk." The young novice monk invited the 3 into the temple and into the courtyard. There were more than 100 monks sitting in the courtyard, old monks and young monks. The little monk was in the innermost circle, the young monk was in the middle circle, and the old monk was in the outermost circle. At the center of the circle sat the calm and composed Kong Hai. Chu Li noticed that a few of the pagodas were emitting a golden light. He could vaguely see a small person sitting in a lotus position amidst the golden light. The light shrouded the entire Titanium Temple. Chu Li's omniscient mirror was ineffective here, so he could not see anything. It was impossible to tell which of these monks had divine abilities and which didn't. From the looks of it, it was impossible to tell. They all looked like they did not cultivate martial arts. Kong Hai sat cross-legged on a yellow cattail hassock. In front of him was a purple wooden box. Other than that, there was nothing else. He closed his eyes slightly and did not move an inch. Chu Li sized him up. The current Kong Hai had the demeanor of a high monk of Buddhism. He was calm and composed. It was as if he was a different person from the Kong Hai who hunted him down. The surrounding monks did not move an inch. It was so quiet that only the sound of the wind and the footsteps of the three could be heard clearly. Kong Hai slowly opened his eyes. He extended his hand and waved. The young novice monk said, "Almsgiver Sio, Almsgiver Chu, Uncle Kong Hai invites the two of you." Guyu looked at the young novice monk. The young novice monk closed his eyes and did not speak. Sio sure looked at Chu Li. Chu Li nodded. The two walked past the monks. They passed by the bald heads and arrived in front of Kong Hai. "Amitabha Buddha," Kong Hai put his palms together. "Almsgiver Sio, Almsgiver Chu, greetings." Chu Li smiled. "Is revered Sir Kong Hai really going to pass away?" "Yes." Kong Hai smiled kindly, calm and serene. "Our ties with the world have ended. It's time to go back." Chu Li said, "Before revered Sir leaves, can you answer my doubts?" Kong Hai smiled. "Almsgiver Chu, please speak." Chu Li said, "I really find it hard to believe that revered Sir would help King and to kill." "Why not?" Kong Hai smiled. Chu Li shook his head. "Revered Sir should be able to see through the riches and glory of the world. You won't bow down to power, right? It's fine to kill or not to kill. It's fine to help King and or not. As a cultivator, if he does not act according to his heart, how can he see through this illusory world?" Kong Hai smiled. "Some things can be done and some things can't be done. It's all in the heart. When King asked me for help, I felt it. The opportunity has come. So I followed King N's words. It's not for other reasons." Chu Li's expression changed slightly. He slowly glanced at the monks who were sitting cross-legged. The young ones were intelligent, the young ones were handsome, and the old ones were like withered trees. Their gazes were calm and peaceful. Chu Li suddenly understood that Kong Hai obeyed King N's order to kill the two of them. It was not for the Titanium Temple, nor was it for King N. The Titanium Temple's way of doing things was different from the Tempest Temple. Everything they did was for cultivation. In their eyes, the world was just a place for cultivation. Killing or not, it was just for cultivation. The Tempest Temple was strict and respected. On the other hand, the Titanium Temple was indifferent to the mundane world. They acted unscrupulously and disdained the mundane world. "Revered Sir, what opportunity is it?" Chu Li asked. Kong Hai said, "The opportunity to leave this world has come. I have to thank Almsgiver Chu for fulfilling my wish." Chu Li smiled. "I don't deserve it." Kong Hai said, "The moment I killed you, I also killed myself. The Kong Hai of today is no longer the Kong Hai of the past. I understand the mundane world and transcend the mundane world. I have to thank Almsgiver Chu." Chu Li seemed to be deep in thought. Although the old monk's words were vague, he was from the Temple of Autumn, so he could understand. The titanium Sarira technique must have enlightened him greatly. After killing someone, he cut off the karma of the mundane world. His state of mind improved, and he could leave this world. Kong Hai turned his head. "Almsgiver Sio." Sio sure looked at him calmly. "What do you have to say, old monk?" Kong Hai pushed the box forward. "This is Almsgiver Sio's hair. Not a single strand is missing." Sio sure scoffed. Chu Li took the box and opened it. It was indeed Seo Shi's hair. He rubbed the hair lightly in his palm. A faint burnt smell wafted over. The hair turned into powder and scattered on the ground with the wind. Kong Hai slowly took off the Sarira prayer beads from his left wrist. He stared at it for a while and sighed with a complicated expression. He passed it to Seo Shi. This prayer beads is something I always carry with me. I am giving it to almsgiver Seo. With this prayer bead on you, no divine power can get close. Chu Li quickly signaled Seo Shi with his eyes. This was the most precious item. She must accept it. Seo Shi frowned as she looked at the prayer beads. She shook her head. Old monk, this is something you always carry with you. Why are you giving it to me? You should give it to your juniors. Can't you see their eyes are shining? Chu Li knew that she disliked the prayer beads because they were ugly and did not want to wear it. Kong Hai smiled kindly. Then his smile blossomed and he laughed out loud. Seo Shi glared at him in annoyance. Kong Hai kept his smile. This is my sincerity. It is also my apology to almsgiver Seo. Chapter 3:03. Chu Li quickly took the prayer beads and stuffed them into Seo Shi's hands. This is a token of appreciation from the revered sir. Just accept it, or else the revered sir will not be able to free himself. To cut off all ties with the world, to end all grudges, to eliminate the cause and effect. My merit is complete. It's time for me to move. Kong Hai laughed. Chu Li quickly asked, Master, the grudge hasn't been resolved yet, right? Kong Hai looked over with a faint smile. Chu Li said, I was killed by you once too. Back then, he wanted to chop Kong Hai into pieces to relieve the hatred in his heart. But now that he saw Kong Hai like this, his hatred dissipated and was no longer as strong. Almsgiver Chu didn't die? Kong Hai asked. Chu Li shook his head. I died once. Kong Hai smiled. If that's the case, I really can't just leave. What does Almsgiver Chu want? Master's divine power. Chu Li said, Can you teach it to me? Kong Hai looked at Chu Li and smiled. Almsgiver Chu is also a Buddhist. Why can't you see through this? Divine power is also a demonic barrier. Chu Li said, If I don't learn it, how can I see through it? Forget it. Kong Hai sighed and said slowly, I will teach Almsgiver Chu the all-knowing technique. If you can understand it, it's fate with the temple. If you can't, there's no need to talk about it. Chu Li smiled. Thank you, revered sir. The technique must not be passed to 6 ears. Almsgiver Chu, please come closer, Kong Hai said. Chu Li looked at him cautiously. Kong Hai smiled and looked at him. Chu Li slowly came closer and put his ear close. Kong Hai softly chanted a Buddhist scripture. His voice was soft, but every word was clear. Chu Li directly imprinted it in his mind and smiled. Thank you, revered sir. Buddhist divine power is for those who are fated and those who have merit. If you can really cultivate the all-knowing technique, the Titanium Temple will not treat you as an enemy. Kong Hai smiled. You can come to the temple to cultivate the 10 lifetimes of Buddhahood. Chu Li smiled. I am fated with Buddhism, but I don't want to become a Buddha. Amit Ba. Revered Sir Kong Hai smiled. Almsgiver Chu, who can predict the future? Master doesn't have the eye of the eye. Chu Li smiled and bowed. He returned to Seo Shi's side. Kong Hai put his palms together towards the two of them, and then he put his palms together towards the rest of the monks. Fellow Shi Xiao, Shitty, Lao Na is leaving. I'll go ahead and wait for you at the sky beyond heaven. After saying that, he put his palms together and remained motionless. Chu Li pulled Seo Shi out of the circle and looked at Kong Hai from afar. All the monks put their palms together and bowed, severing the false self to become the true self. Seeming illusory, yet real becomes real. Kong Hai chanted softly, Amit Ba, His voice gradually deepened. In the end, there was only silence. Amitabha. All the monks chanted the name of Buddha in unison, their voices sounding like a huge bell. Konghai's body gradually emitted light, and the light grew brighter and brighter. Under the illumination of the light, his body gradually became translucent, turning into colored glass, just like when he used the Vajrasarira technique. The glazed body suddenly shone brightly, and everyone was almost blinded. When they could see clearly again, they saw a white light shooting straight into the sky, like a white pillar standing between heaven and earth. Above the pillar of light, the clouds parted, and a building could be vaguely seen. Palaces and pavilions floated in the air. The palaces were golden color, with gold bricks and gold tiles, white jade railings, blue sand paving the ground, and white lotuses were everywhere, floating with the wind, competing to bloom. The faint chanting of scriptures floated down from the sky, mellow and gentle. It was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman. It was melodious and pleasant, like flower petals falling on people. When the sound entered his ears, Chu Li felt his body and mind instantly calmed down. His body suddenly became much lighter. In a trance, he felt as if he was about to fly. An inexplicable sense of joy arose. All his worries disappeared, and he was carefree. His soul fell into a state of great peace and joy, and he could not wait to convert to Buddhism. From then on, he would be free from worries. In front of the Golden Palace, Konghai's figure slowly appeared. A white lotus floated over, supported his legs, and floated into the palace. The pillar of light suddenly disappeared, and the chanting of scriptures dissipated. Everything returned to normal, and there were only 6 Sarairas on the cattail hassock. Seosher said softly, "This is his 6th life." Chu Li raised his eyebrows. "How many Sarairas represent which life?" Seosher nodded and said softly, "In another 100 years, he will reincarnate again, but by then, he won't be able to recognize us." "It really is mysterious," Chu Li exclaimed. "The Outland really exists. What's there to doubt?" Seosher looked at him in surprise. "You actually think that the Outland doesn't exist?" Chu Li asked, "Why does it exist? Why not?" Seosher said, "There's always someone better than you. Haven't you heard of this?" Chu Li laughed. This world was indeed different from his original world. It was more mysterious. The monks got up and left. An old monk slowly walked in front of the cattail hassock, kept the 6 Sarairas, and walked in front of the 3. "Revered sir, I would like to cultivate in your temple for a period of time," Chu Li said. The old monk's movements were hesitant and difficult, as if he would stop at any time. Guyu recognized him. He was the old monk who opened the temple door last time. The old monk frowned and looked at Chu Li. "You and junior brother Konghai are fated. You can cultivate in his house, but there's only one house, almsgiver Seo. I'll stay here too." Seosher said, "I'll just stay with him." "Then it's fine," the old monk said slowly. Guyu widened his eyes at Chu Li, then looked at Seosher. Seosher said coldly, "What are you looking at?" Guyu hesitated for a while, then braced himself and said, "Princess, this is not good, right?" "What's not good?" Seosher said impatiently. "Are you afraid that he has ulterior motives?" "This is really a hindrance to Princess's reputation. I'm just afraid that if His Highness finds out, Chief Chu..." Guyu looked at Chu Li. Although Chu Li was a scribe, he was still a man, and a young man at that. They had to be careful if they were to be so close, His Highness King, and would not be able to take it no matter how magnanimous he was, and would definitely kill Chu Li. If the hierarchy between men and women was so useful, the imperial palace would not need eunuchs anymore. Chu Li said, "Lady Seosher will stay in the house. I'll stay outside, as long as I'm in the temple." The titanium temple was shrouded in golden light. Chu Li guessed that this golden light might be beneficial to the cultivation of divine power, so he decided to give it a try and understand it. If he could really understand the all-seeing divine power, it would be the best. Gu Yu quickly said, "Then can I stay in the temple too?" The old monk looked at Gu Yu and shook his head. "Almsgiver, you are not fated with the temple. Please leave." Gu Yu's face did not look good. He said in a low voice, "I have an old relationship with revered Sir Kong Hai. How can you say that we are not fated?" The old monk gently waved his tattered sleeves. Gu Yu flew up like a dandelion swept away by the wind. In the blink of an eye he was in the sky, flew out of the temple wall, and disappeared. Chu Li looked at the old monk, who looked like he was about to die at any time. He could not use the omniscient mirror. He could not see through the old monk's background. Gu Yu was one of the top grandmasters, but in front of this old monk, he was powerless. This old monk's power was obvious. If it was him, he would not be any different. "Go, go. You only have 10 days. Turn left, second house." The old monk murmured, turned around, and left slowly. Chu Li and Xiao Shi arrived at Kong Hai's house. Xiao Shi went in to take a look, but did not say anything. Chapter 304. Xiao Shi saw how hard-working he was and knew that divine powers were important to him, so she did not disturb him. However, she was not optimistic about it. If divine powers were so easy to cultivate, the Titanium Temple would not only have these people, they would have long surpassed the Tempest Temple. There were more than 100 monks. Other than the novice monks, young monks, and middle-aged monks, the only ones who could truly cultivate divine powers were the old ones. 20 of them would be enough to break the heavens. That meant they had trained for more than 100 years. Every disciple of the Titanium Temple was a genius. There were some who achieved divine powers at a young age, but that was only possible after training in the temple for a few years. Chu Li must be dreaming if he wanted to achieve anything in just 10 days. However, if he wanted to learn divine powers so badly, then let him be. Xiao Shi left the house and strolled around the courtyard. More than 10 novice monks gathered around her and looked at her curiously. A skinny, yellow-faced novice monk pressed his palms together and said, "Lady Almsgiver, can you take off your veil and let us see what you look like?" "No, little monk. I'm afraid you'll be tempted." Xiao Shi shook her head. "Lady Almsgiver, you underestimate us." Although the novice monk looked sickly, his eyes were bright and clear. "We see beauties as skeletons. Why would we be tempted?" "That's right. Lady Almsgiver, you're just a set of bones." The novice monk beside him agreed. Xiao Shi smiled. "Little monk, you're so stubborn. Do I really have to take off my veil?" "Take it off. Let us see." The novice monks urged. Xiao Shi smiled at them. "What if you're tempted and ruin your cultivation? What if your master comes after me?" "We won't blame you, we won't blame you. Lady Almsgiver, we won't say a word." The novice monks said. The skinny novice monk said, "Lady Almsgiver, are you ugly?" "What a little monk. You know beauty and ugliness?" Xiao Shi smiled. The skinny novice monk said, "Lady Almsgiver, I'm Sue and not a little monk." "All right, little monk Sue." And Xiao Shi said, "Can you bring me a sturdier string? I want to split the prayer beads into 2 strings." Sarira prayer beads. Suan quickly said, "Lady Almsgiver, this is a Sarira Buddhist bead. You must not lose it." "Is it okay to split it into 2? Xiao Shi said, "My wrist is too thin. I can't wear it." "I'll go get the wire." Void ran away like a wisp of smoke. He quickly picked up a white thread and looked at it, but it was abnormally flexible. "This is the Void silkworm thread." The Void said, as if it was presenting a treasure, "Even a knife can't cut it." "Thank you, little monk." Xiao Shi smiled. She took off the prayer beads and tried to untie them, but she failed. Suan giggled and said, "This is a prajna button. Female almsgiver, you won't be able to undo it. Let me do it." "You people from the Titanium Temple sure have a lot of tricks up your sleeves." Co sure passed the prayer beads to him. Suan said, "Because master and martial uncles are too free." The novice monks giggled. Suan's fingers were slender and nimble. He quickly untied the prayer beads, then lowered his head to separate the prayer beads. However, because there were 35 of them, he couldn't divide them evenly. He frowned and thought for a moment, then suddenly stood up and ran away. Co sure looked at him strangely. After a while, Suan ran back with a saraira in his hand. He put it into the original saraira, and there were 36 of them now. He was instantly beaming. Co sure pursed her lips and smiled. "Little monk, you're quite interesting. Forget it, you don't need to pay. You can just take this one," she said as she passed 2 saraira to Su, and "This is for you. I'll remember you, little monk Su," and Suan quickly waved his hand to reject it. He was a disciple of the Titanium Temple, so naturally he knew how precious this saraira was. Co sure said, "Take it. In the future, I might need you to save me. 1 saraira can perform the Titanium saraira technique once. You owe me a life, so cultivate well." "Thank you, female almsgiver." Suan accepted the saraira and pursed his lips. He said seriously, "I'll definitely save you once." Co sure smiled lightly. "All right, I'll wait, but you must cultivate well, lest you can't save me when I'm in danger." "Definitely not." Suan nodded heavily. Co sure smiled as she looked at Suan. She found it interesting. Suddenly, she took off her veil, revealing her devastatingly beautiful face. She smiled brilliantly and put the veil back on, smiling at them with narrowed eyes. Suan and the novice monks were stunned. Co sure knew it would end like this. She smiled lightly, turned around, and left. She returned to the house and passed a string of prayer beads to Chuli. "This is for you." Chuli opened his eyes and looked at the saraira prayer beads. "I know you like this." Co sure said, "Your eyes are shining. Take it." Chuli smiled and took it. "This is good stuff. It can block all divine powers." "What's the use of blocking divine powers?" Co sure said disapprovingly, "Divine powers aren't omnipotent. If a punch comes, it can't block it at all." Chuli said, "What's hard to defend against is divine powers. Martial arts aren't that scary." "Stop bragging. Martial arts aren't scary?" Co sure said, "Just like that old monk just now, what's the use of divine powers?" Chuli smiled and did not argue with her. If it was him just now, he could have dodged it. "I found a young monk. He's very interesting." Co sure smiled and told him what happened just now. Chuli said, "This young monk has great wisdom. It's rare. He's stupid and silly. What great wisdom." Co sure said. Chuli said, "Gain and loss, pros and cons. These are just worldly calculations. He's a cultivator. To be able to cast all these aside, if it's not wisdom, what is it? I'd like to meet him when I have the time. You want to give him some advice again?" Co sure smiled. "This is the Titanium Temple." Chuli laughed. "That's true. How is it? Have you cultivated the divine powers?" Co sure asked. Chuli frowned. He had no clue. There was a faint force that was preventing him from comprehending. This force was slightly weakened by the golden light, but it was still strong enough. To cultivate the divine powers, it would take more than a few days. If he really wanted to cultivate the divine powers, it would be best to isolate himself in the Titanium Temple and use the environment here to improve. Once he left the Titanium Temple, his progress would be extremely slow, and he would almost never be able to comprehend the divine powers. No wonder the disciples of the Titanium Temple rarely went out. It was not good for cultivation outside the temple. Seosher said, "It's fine if you can't cultivate it. It's a waste of time." Chuli shook his head. "I'll stay here for a few days. It's safer here." "Up to you. It's fine, even if you stay until the day of your wedding. I'm going to sleep for a while. You can cultivate by yourself." She went straight to the bed. Chuli quickly got off the bed. "You rest first. I'll go out and cultivate." He then left the house and went to a pagoda. Why was there a small person sitting in the golden light of the pagoda? He felt that it was not an illusion. What was it? Unfortunately, the omniscient mirror could only see inside the temple. It could not leave the body, so he could not figure it out. A few novice monks sat together under another pagoda. They sat in the lotus position and did not move. They were all cultivating. Chuli smiled at them. They were all geniuses. None of them were weaker than him. They might even be better than him. Chapter 305. P.S. The first update tomorrow morning will be at 9. It's too early in the morning, and I'll be delayed if something happens. Let's try it out and see how it goes. Chuli went forward and smiled. "May I ask, young revered sir, what are they doing?" "Benefactor Chu, they are meditating. Don't worry." Su-an put away the saraira, pressed his palms together, and said seriously. Chuli smiled. "Why do I need to calm down?" When they saw Benefactor Zhao's face, their hearts were moved, and their hearts were in chaos. Su-an said, "Therefore they must calm their hearts and be at ease." "Then why don't you use it, little venerable? The heart has always been moving. What's the point of being calm?" "It's better to just let it be," Su-an said. Chuli smiled. "Young revered sir, there's a deeper meaning behind your words." "Master doesn't like to hear this." Su-an shook his head and said with a vexed expression. Chuli said, "Once young revered sir cultivates the divine power, your master won't bother too much." "I can't cultivate," Su-an said. Chuli raised his eyebrows. "Why?" "Master said that my body is congenitally deficient, so I can't cultivate. If I cultivate, I'll only die faster," Su-an said. Chuli nodded slowly. His face was indeed sickly, and his body looked very weak. "I know a little about medicine. What do you think?" Chuli extended his hand. Su-an handed over his wrist. Chuli could not rely on the omniscient mirror, so he could only circulate his inner energy around his body bit by bit. He remained silent. It was true that his meridians were weak and dispirited, a sign of a congenital deficiency, but after that, he denied that Su-an's pulse was very similar to Seosher's, but he believed that it would not be such a coincidence. Su-an said, "Master said that this body has to be nurtured slowly. There's nothing we can do about it. Divine arts aren't omnipotent." "I can't cultivate the 10 lifetimes of Dharma?" Chuli asked. Su-an said, "If I want to cultivate the 10 lifetimes of Buddhahood, I must first cultivate a type of divine art. I can't cultivate it now." "I have an idea." Chuli saw that he had an outstanding temperament and was born with wisdom. He was indeed a good seedling. The thought of hoarding a rare commodity came up again. "But I can only use it outside the temple. You can cure my body." Su-an tilted his head and looked at him. Chuli replied, "Sure." "Then I'll have to ask Master," said Su-an. Chuli smiled and nodded. Su-an pressed his palms together, stood up, and ran off. After a while, an old monk strode over. He was tall and burly, slightly stooped, with a lion's nose and tiger's eyes. His eyes were sharp and threatening, making him look more like a martial arts hero. He did not seem like an eminent monk. "Old Monk Kong, F.A. greets almsgiver Chu." The old monk put his palms together and bowed. Chuli pressed his palms together. "Revered Sir Kong, F.A., I have a skill called the 9 transformation meridian reforming technique. It can cure young revered Sir Su En's congenital deficiency. Amit Ba. Kong Fa put his palms together and laughed joyfully. The opportunity has indeed come. Heaven has not forsaken Suen. Thank you, almsgiver Chu. Chu Li said, I'm going to perform it outside the temple. I wonder if revered Sir Kong Fa is at ease. Can this old monk accompany you? Of course. Then it's fine. When can it be treated? There are enough needles. I can do it now. Chu Li told him about the needles he needed. Monk Kong Fa stood up and strode away. Chu Li looked at his bearing and looked at Suen. Like master, like disciple, Kong Fa acted according to his nature. Suen was a little similar to Kong Fa. After a while, Kong Fa passed a box of needles to Chu Li. Chu Li took it and glanced at it. All right, let's leave the temple. The three of them pushed open the courtyard door and went outside the temple. Chu Li found a forest that was sheltered from the wind. He was going to perform the 9 transformation meridian reforming technique on Suen. After leaving the golden light of the pagoda, Chu Li asked Su and to pass the Saraira to Kong Fa. The omniscient mirror was activated to see every part of Su En's body. His face immediately darkened. He did not think that there would be such a coincidence in this world. He frowned and looked at Kong Fa. Kong Fa noticed that Chu Li's expression was a little strange. Almsgiver Chu? Chu Li said, Does Great Master Kong Fa know about young revered Sir Su En's condition? Congenital weakness. Kong Fa said, His vitality must have been damaged in his mother's womb. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. It's the vitality sealing finger. When he saw the vitality sealing finger, he thought of the suffering Seo Shi had suffered. The person who did it was extremely vicious. Last time it was Kingen. Who would it be this time? How could such a vicious technique be passed down? It could be seen how evil people could be. Kong Fa was at a loss. Chu Li then explained the origin of the vitality sealing finger. It's such a vicious technique. Kong Fa was furious. What a scoundrel. There's actually such a vicious person in this world. I can't wait to die under his palm. Chu Li said, It seems that young revered Sir Su En has an extraordinary background. A normal family's child would not be qualified to receive the vitality sealing finger. Kong Fa sighed and shook his head. Su En is indeed the son of a nobleman. However, since he has entered the Titanium Temple, he has left home. Everything in the mortal world is like an old dream. Let it all go. There's no need to care about it. Chu Li saw that he had no intention of revealing anything. Because of the Saraira, he could not see through Kong Fa's thoughts. Chu Li said, If that's the case, then let's perform the technique. Chu Li, Kong Fa, and Suen stayed outside for a night. The next morning, Chu Li removed the needles. Su En's sickly complexion had mostly faded. He looked much more relaxed. Suen waved his arms excitedly. Almsgiver Chu, I'm fine now? Chu Li smiled. There's still one more step. Remove the vitality sealing finger. He looked at Kong Fa. Revered sir, removing the vitality sealing finger is extremely dangerous. There's a slim chance of survival. Just remove it. Kong Fa said lightly. All right. Chu Li fiercely hit Su En's Baihui acupoint. Suen froze. Thick inner energy went straight down like a mountain torrent. It instantly broke through all the obstacles around him. Puffed, 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 puffed. Suen farted and was instantly refreshed. Chu Li let go of his hand and let out a long sigh. It's done. Kong Fa felt Su En's wrist and grinned. Good, good. It's a great opportunity indeed. Suen, hurry and kowtow to almsgiver Chu. Chu Li quickly waved his hand and smiled. There's no need for that. It's nothing. It's nothing for you. For Suen, it's 10 lifetimes of fate. Kong Fa chuckled. The grace of giving him a new lease of life should be properly thanked. How about this? I'll teach you another divine power. Chuli could not help but laugh. Revered sir, your temple's divine power is, Kong Fa said. Techniques are not easily taught, but you've saved Suen. How can I not repay your kindness? Chuli thought about it. Then I won't decline. What divine power does revered sir want to teach me? How about God's limbs? I couldn't ask for more. All right then, we'll teach it when we return to the temple. No one in the temple can spy on us. It's hard to say outside, Kong Fa said. Chuli glanced around. The three of them returned to the temple. A few novice monks were practicing their fist techniques. When they saw them return, two of them ran away and quickly brought back two old monks. Kong Fa laughed out loud. Brother Kong Ji, Brother Kong Hui, Almsgiver Chu has cured Suen. The two old monks looked at Suen, then touched his wrist and looked at Chu Li in admiration. I want to teach Almsgiver Chu Li God's limbs. Kong Fa, it's better to teach something else. Even if you teach him divine power, he won't be able to cultivate it. Old monk Kong, she shook his head. Not necessarily. Kong Fa smiled. I see that Almsgiver Chu is extraordinarily intelligent. He might be able to cultivate it. Not now, but maybe one day in the future. Forget it. Up to you. The two old monks shook their heads and left. Kong Fa brought Chu Li to his room, the second room on the right, and taught him a scripture. When Chu Li returned to the room, Xiao Shi was sitting at the table reading a book. She glanced at him and scoffed. Her face was tense as she continued reading. Chu Li smiled as he told her what happened. Xiao Shi's face darkened. Vitality? Sealing finger? It can't be that Princeton again, right? How could there be such a coincidence? Chu Li shook his head. Xiao Shi scoffed. The little monk's luck is really good. There were only a few people in the world who could break the vitality sealing finger. Chu Li was one of them, but he was met by the little monk. Yes, luck is also very important in cultivation. Chu Li said, young, revered Sir Suen will become a great person in the future, just like Lady Xiao Shi. One who survives a disaster is bound to have good fortune later on. Chapter 306. P.S. Thank you for your enthusiasm. I'm flattered. The next chapter is at 11 o'clock. Xiao Shi glared at him. Chu Li hurriedly waved his hand to indicate that he had misspoken. However, this Suen is full of spirituality. He will definitely be successful in the Titanium Temple. What benefits did you get this time? Xiao Shi asked. Chu Li looked at her helplessly. She displayed her intelligence to the fullest in front of him. Her words were straight to the point, and she did not hold back at all. You don't do things that don't benefit you. Xiao Shi chuckled. I've seen through you. Chu Li coughed softly. There's no such thing. All right, I've obtained God's limbs again. Xiao Shi giggled. Chu Li smiled and said, my kindness has become 100 schemes in your eyes. You're really gauging the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. Come on. Xiao Shi's body trembled. You call yourself a gentleman. But he really is a gentleman. Chu Li said, I think it's easier to cultivate God's limbs. I might even be able to master it before I leave the temple. Don't disturb me. I know. I'll go play with these novice monks. Xiao Shi stood up and smiled. Chu Li hurriedly said, don't overdo it. Don't ruin the cultivation of the young revered ones. You're too kind. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes at him and left the room. Chu Li shook his head in resignation. Her personality was the exact opposite of Xiao Qi's. She was warm on the outside, but cold on the inside. Even after she recovered and became more cheerful, her nature remained the same. Her temperament was ever-changing. In front of outsiders, she was usually cold, sometimes gentle, and sometimes smiling sweetly like a flower. But no matter what kind of expression he had, his heart was cold, indifferent, and he didn't care about others. He didn't even care about his own life and death. So how could he care about the life and death of others? For these little supreme experts, she was a trial they had to pass. Before they got involved in matters of the heart, they had to see through their outer appearances. His mind was calm and undisturbed. Chu Li sat quietly on the brick bed as a round mirror appeared in his mind. The scripture of God's limbs was circulating in the mirror. In the titanium temple, the omniscient mirror could not be used outside, but it could be used internally. Every word of the scripture flashed in the round mirror, deducing the profound meaning of the scripture. Unknowingly, he had entered the deepest level of meditation. His mind was completely immersed in the scripture, and the Sarira prayer beads on his wrist emitted a faint golden light. The golden light gradually gathered. Finally, it condensed behind Chu Li's head and formed a 5-colored halo. He sat in a lotus position, his expression slowly changing. His appearance was solemn, quiet, and peaceful. At noon, Seoshur pushed open the door and entered. Seeing his strange appearance, her bright eyes moved back and forth on his body, and her black eyebrows slightly furrowed. He couldn't really have become a monk, right? What if they didn't leave the titanium temple? She sank into her chair and rested her elbows on the table. He rested his chin on his left palm and stared at Chu Li. Chu Li did not move at all. He did not feel anything. Seoshur suddenly felt that this face was both familiar and strange at the same time. Thinking back to the time they first met, everything had changed too quickly. It was like a fleeting dream. Everything had changed too quickly. A year ago, when had he ever taken him seriously? He couldn't even be bothered to look at him. A year later, she was sharing a room with him, intimately connected. The world changes in a strange way. It was really unfathomable. Who knew what would happen to him in another year? What about in 10 years? What about 20 years later? Where the thoughts lie, where I am. Chu Li chanted softly, where I think is where I am. The golden light at the back of his head shrunk and drilled into the back of his head. He suddenly disappeared. Seoshur was shocked. Chu Li suddenly reappeared with a face full of smiles. Seoshur hurriedly asked, "You've mastered it?" Chu Li laughed heartily. "It's really fast." "How long has it been?" Seoshur turned to look at the window. It was already evening. "A day." Chu Li praised. "What a great God's limbs." "You've really mastered it." Seoshur said, "Is there any difference between it and your light body technique? Your Qigong is also very powerful. Don't forget to practice it. Don't even think about it. It's still not as good as your light body technique." Back then, when Chu Li carried her to perform Imminent Skyline, she still had lingering fears. The pain was unbearable, and she almost lost her life. But she also knew the secret of Imminent Skyline. She could ignore distance and obstacles and directly cross over. It was like building a bridge in the air, directly crossing over forests and mountains. Although it was painful, it was very magical. Chu Li smiled. "Let's put it this way. Imminent Skyline can only reach places that the eyes can see. As for God's limbs, it can only reach places that the mind can sense. Now that I've merged both of them, it's considered a new God's limbs, and I can reach places that I want." Seoshur's beautiful eyes flashed as if she was deep in thought. "In other words, you can go wherever you want." Chu Li said, "More or less. Of course, I have to go to places that I can clearly remember. If I want to go to the Fu Dynasty, that's impossible. If I want to go back to the High Duke's public house, That's not a problem. Can you bring me along? Seoshur hurriedly asked. Chu Li pondered. Bringing you along will consume 10 times more inner energy than if I did it myself. It's not a problem if the distance is close. Then let's give it a try, Seoshur said with a smile. How about going to Qingyun Town? Although Qingyun Town was broken, it gave her the best memories. It was warm and wonderful. It's too far, Chu Li said. Seoshur glared at him. Chu Li smiled, but we can give it a try. Seoshur stood up. Her graceful curves flashed and disappeared, covered by her loose purple robe. Chu Li got off the bed and held her wrist. The two of them disappeared. In the next moment, the two of them appeared outside the temple. Seoshur did not feel uncomfortable this time. She only felt a flash in front of her, as if it had darkened for a moment. Then, it quickly became bright again. She was already standing outside the temple. It's much better than your light body technique, Seoshur said. With this, I can run away even if I can't win. Chu Li nodded. Let's go. The combination of God's limbs and imminent skyline was far better than any of them. The two of them disappeared again and reappeared a few times along the way. Thanks to his photographic memory, he could clearly remember every place he passed, from the Titanium Temple to Qingyun Town. He flashed 5 times and finally appeared in his courtyard. Seoshur let out a long sigh of relief and smiled sweetly. Chu Li said, Why don't you stay here? I'll go back to the Titanium Temple. What if someone tries to kill me? Seoshur rolled her eyes. Chu Li removed the prayer beads from his wrist. If there's any danger, crush one and I'll come back immediately. This Sarira prayer bead is already compatible with my heart. Forget it, I'll go back with you. Seoshur waved her hand and did not take the prayer beads. This thing is very precious. Crushing one will make your heart ache for a few days. Chu Li smiled and put it on. All right then, take some daily necessities, and we'll go back to the temple. I want to continue comprehending all-seeing heaven and earth and try to cultivate it. You might as well become a monk. Seoshur said, unhappily. Chu Li said, my 6 senses are impure. I can't become a monk. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left the Temple of Autumn. Seoshur entered the house and changed her clothes. She took a few more items and made them into a bundle. Chu Li brought her back to the Titanium Temple. The Titanium Temple was still quiet. Seoshur smiled and put down the bundle. She said, Chu Li, the most convenient thing to do after cultivating God's limbs is to see my sister. Chu Li's expression changed slightly. Seoshur pursed her lips and laughed. Chu Li sighed. His initial excitement was gone. Chapter 307. P.S. I've been racking my brains every day for everyone to like it. If you can support the original version, I'll be very grateful. The next watch was at 1400 hours. Chu Li stood in front of the window for a while. Suddenly, he turned his head and said, I'm going out for a while. Why? Are you really going to see little sister? Seoshur smiled. Chu Li glared at her fiercely. There are a few things that need to be done immediately. It's time to make things clear to Master Xiao Taiying. Otherwise, you'll be at a great disadvantage if you're caught off guard. That's true. Seoshur gently nodded. Big Brother is an open and honest person. He won't think badly of people. He's always thought that king and is a good person. He has a good reputation, and he won't get involved in the fight for the throne, so there's no danger. Chu Li said, I still have to see Lu Yurong. What for? Seoshur frowned. She only had hatred for Lu Yurong. Back then, Lu Yurong wanted to kill her. If it were not for Chu Li, she would have died in her hands. Chu Li said, join forces with her to deal with King and Lu Yurong? Xiaoshi burst into laughter. Chu Li said, "She's also King In's enemy. If that's the case, why don't the two public houses work together to deal with King In? Lu Yurong will not ally with us." Xiaoshi shook her head. The hatred between the two residences is too deep, especially Lu Yurong. Chu Li said, "Under the threat of King, and no matter how big the grudge is, it can be put aside for now. You don't understand Lu Yurong. She hates King In and hates us even more." Xiaoshi scoffed. "A woman's way of thinking is different from a man's. Let's give it a try, and we have to do it as soon as possible. Otherwise, a long night may bring trouble, and she might make a move first. I just don't know if eldest young master will agree. I can only suggest this matter, but I can't make a decision. After all, the E-Public House was managed by Master Xiao Taiying. No matter how powerful he was only a rank 2 scribe and could not represent the public house. Why don't you bring me back to see Big Brother?" Xiaoshi frowned. "I'm afraid that Big Brother will act on his emotions and break off the engagement." Chu Li sighed. He did not tell Xiao Taiying about it because he was afraid that Xiao Taiying would do it. For the sake of his sister, Xiao Taiying was willing to do anything. His usual wise and calm demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Just like a parent whose child was in trouble, they lost their usual intelligence. Only impulsiveness. Chu Li sighed. "Actually, even if you don't join the imperial residence, King In will still go against the House of High Dukes. Why should I enter the mansion again?" Xiaoshi rolled her eyes at him. "What's wrong? Do you miss me all of a sudden?" "I guess so." Xiaoshi chuckled. "It's just death." Chu Li said, "Now that I've cultivated this divine power, if something goes wrong, I'll just leave immediately. You should still wear this." He suddenly reached out his hand. He took off the Saraira beads on Xiaoshi's left wrist and put his own on her. Xiaoshi let him put it on and smiled. "When I see my younger sister, I'll show it to her and tell her that it's a token of our love." Chu Li reached out to snatch it back, but she smiled and dodged it. Chu Li glared at her and put it on. As long as he cultivated a few more times, he would be able to connect this string to his mind. Xiaoshi smiled and said, "I'll give you an idea. I'll talk to Big Brother personally. If he breaks up the marriage, I'll kill myself." Chu Li shook his head and laughed. Poor Master Xiao Taiying. No matter how powerful the eldest young master was, it was useless. Every one of his younger sisters had him under control. Chu Li sent Xiaoshi back to the public house's Iron Eagle Island. Chu Li let Xiaoshi into the main hall while he stayed outside. She wanted to force the eldest young master, so it wasn't appropriate for him to be present. Otherwise, the eldest young master would feel embarrassed and ruin things. Standing outside the hall, he clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the surface of the lake. He could only hear Xiao Taiying's angry roar from time to time. Xiaoshi's voice was calm and indifferent. He was not affected by the roar. After a while, Lin Quan came out carefully and invited Chu Li in. Chu Li entered the main hall. Xiaoshi sat quietly in the armchair and did not look at him. Xiao Taiying was pacing back and forth in big strides. He was still in a state of rage and agitation. "Greetings, Master Xiao Taiying." Chu Li closed fist saluted. Xiao Taiying waved his hand. His face was ghastly pale. He glared at Chu Li and scoffed. "Chu Li, did you already know about King In?" Chu Li replied, "I only found out when I was being hunted down." Naturally, he couldn't admit it. Otherwise, the eldest young master would inevitably hold a grudge. No matter how loyal he was, he wouldn't dare to believe that a guard dared to hide everything from him. Xiao Taiying frowned. "Is it really King In?" Chu Li said, "Master Xiao Taiying, I've already investigated. King An wants the throne, that's for sure. So the House of High Dukes has become a thorn in his side. He must get rid of them as soon as possible. This is too much. Xiao Taiying clenched his teeth. He was furious. He hated King An to the core. How dare he treat his sister and the House of High Dukes like this? If Chu Li didn't find out, wouldn't he be the dumbest fool in the world? He scoffed. King An, he's taking advantage of father's absence. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to do this. Chu Li shook his head. How powerful was High Duke Lu of the Rin Public House? Didn't King An still fight with Lu Yurong? No matter how powerful a High Duke was, he wouldn't dare to kill a prince. But a prince might dare to kill a High Duke, Xiao Taiying said. Chu Li, what do you think? Chu Li glanced at Xiao Shi. Xiao Taiying scoffed. Can you really protect second sister? Chu Li closed fist saluted. As long as I'm alive, Lady Xiao won't die. Xiao Taiying stared at him. His gaze was like cold lightning. Chu Li was calm. Lin Quan, bring me a pen and paper. Xiao Taiying shouted. Lin Quan quickly agreed and prepared the pen and ink. Chu Li, I'll leave second sister to you. Xiao Taiying said, I'll personally meet High Duke Song. I'll write a letter to High Duke Lu. Chu Li, your light body technique is amazing. Help me deliver it. Chu Li closed fist saluted. He could vaguely see Xiao Taiying's decisiveness and sharpness. He could guess what Xiao Taiying was talking about. King An was so against the House of High Dukes. If he were to ascend the throne, the Ji dynasty's House of High Dukes would be in danger. Xiao Taiying wanted King An to become the enemy of the House of High Dukes. However, this was not an easy task. The relationship between the House of High Dukes and the House of High Dukes, the House of High Dukes, and the Imperial Palace was complicated. Chu Li said, Second Lady will stay in the public house for now. That's fine, Xiao Taiying said. Since you could bring her back without a sound, you can also bring her away without a sound too, right? Xiao Shi glared at Chu Li. Chu Li smiled and nodded. Xiao Taiying pondered for a moment. His brush moved like a dragon and a snake. Lin Quan blew the paper dry, put it in an envelope, and passed it to Xiao Taiying. Xiao Taiying pointed at Chu Li. Lin Quan then passed the letter to Chu Li. Chu Li took it and closed fist saluted. Xiao Taiying, I'll go to Green Mountain Town immediately. You don't have to hold too much hope. I know that woman Lu Yurong. She's very vicious. She will never join forces with us. You have to be careful. Don't be careless just because you have divine powers. Xiao Taiying warned. If he did not know that Chu Li had mastered God's limbs, he would not dare to let Chu Li go to Green Mountain Town. Yes, I'll leave immediately, Chu Li said. He had to go to Green Mountain Town first and return to the Titanium Temple as soon as possible. This was a rare opportunity. He wanted to master the all-seeing divine power as soon as possible. If the all-seeing divine power could be combined with God's limbs, it would be even more powerful. Kong Hai could not use both at the same time. However, he had the life and death scripture. Wait, Xiao Shi said. Chu Li looked at her. Send me back to the Titanium Temple, Xiao Shi said. All right, Chu Li agreed. He closed fist saluted Xiao Taiying first, then held Xiao Shi's wrist and disappeared in a flash. Xiao Taiying was deep in thought. He looked at the place where they disappeared without saying a word. The main hall suddenly became quiet. Lin Quan stood quietly behind him, not moving an inch. Lin Quan, did you notice that second sister treats Chu Li? Xiao Taiying frowned. Lin Quan smiled, but did not say anything. Chapter 308. Lin Quan said, Young master need not worry too much. second mistress is only closer to you because you have saved her many times, just like you and I. It's not the same. Co Tying shook his head. I know this second sister of mine very well. No matter how many times I save her, she won't be close to her. Forget it. I can't control her too much. Ha! Who can control her? At this point, his face darkened again, and he was extremely angry. Lin Quan smiled without saying a word. Co Tying clenched his teeth for a while, and finally sighed, What a pity! I should have broken off the engagement with Prince, and it would have been a good idea to marry her off to Chu Li. Lin Quan was silent. Co Tying sighed again. His face was gloomy. His little sister clearly knew that Prince and had ill intentions, but she still wanted to enter the residence. In the end, it was all because of his incompetence as her big brother. Annoyed, he got up and went to the back garden to vent his frustration on his martial arts. Co Sure returned to the Titanium Temple and entered the house. She lazily sat on the chair, took off her veil, and looked up at him. Lu Yurong is not that easy to convince. Her beautiful face was like white jade, emitting a warm luster that made people want to caress her. Her eyes were like two deep pools, making it difficult for one to pull themselves out. I'll meet her in person, Chu Li muttered. He could not see through Lu Yurong. After a few encounters, he knew that once she made up her mind, it would be hard for others to persuade her. However, he still had to try and see if there was a chance to find out anything. I can only wish you good luck. Xiao Shi waved her hand. Your cultivation time in the Titanium Temple is limited. Don't miss it. I'll be back today. Chu Li nodded and suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared outside Green Mountain City. His white robe fluttered in the wind as he slowly walked to the city gates. He showed the white jade pendant on his waist to the guards. When the guards saw his jade pendant, his eyes flickered, and he respectfully returned it. Once Chu Li entered the city, he immediately called for someone to take his place. Then he slipped into the city and rushed to the Rin public house as fast as he could. The sun was setting. Lu Yurong was reading a book in a gazebo in the back garden. She was dressed in a loose white robe with her hair hanging loosely over her shoulders. Flowers bloomed outside the pavilion, dyed red by the setting sun. There was a beautiful maid sitting on each side of her, smiling as they brought the melon fruits to her mouth. A slender maid entered the pagoda, lightly, and said softly, My lady, Chu Li from the public house has entered the city. Chu Li? Lu Yurong put down the scroll, lazily sweeping it away. He sat up straight and asked, When? He just entered the city. The slender maid said, When Meng Zhonglin saw the token, he immediately came to report. How dare you? Lu Yurong slapped the scroll and sneered, How dare you enter my green mountain town alone? What do you think the public house is? Miss, the slender maid said, Should we send someone to capture him immediately? Not yet. Let's wait and see what he wants to do. Lu Yurong scoffed. Such a smart person, he wouldn't come here to die. He's most likely here. Looking for Miss? The three maids widened their eyes in surprise. Lu Yurong said, Otherwise, would he dare to enter the city? Little Xing, go guard the entrance of the mansion. Call for me as soon as he arrives. All right. The slender maid, Little Xing, responded crisply and left lightly. Lu Yurong lightly slapped the scroll, deep in thought. The two maids did not speak and did not move, so as not to disturb her deep thoughts. After a while, Lu Yurong scoffed and slammed the scroll heavily on the table. No matter how she thought about it, Chu Li was here to make peace, to ease the grudge of the bride kidnapping last time, to prevent ruining the marriage between the public house and the imperial residence of Prince N. Humph, Chu Li was the smartest. How could he not notice Prince N's true attitude? She delayed taking action. She wanted to watch a good show. She wanted to see how the public house would fall into the hands of Prince, and it would save her the trouble of doing it herself. They would counterattack and exhaust Prince and strength. That would be even better. Chu Li's visit, could it be that he was begging her to take action, to snatch the bride, to sever his relationship with Prince and to save the public house from disaster? How could there be such a good thing? Miss. Little Xing flew to the backyard like a breeze and went to the pagoda. Mississippi. He sent an invitation to the public house, she said as she handed over a quaint invitation. Lu Yurong gestured for her to open it. Little Xing opened the invitation. Lu Yurong glanced at it and scoffed. Lu Wailu invited me for a drink. Ignore him. Ignore him? Little Xing was surprised. Are we supposed to forgive him? Humph, since he's in Green Mountain Town, how can we let him have the final say? Lu Yurong said lightly, ignore him, let him wait. Will he tell the world that Miss is afraid and doesn't dare to keep the appointment? Little Xing hesitated. Let him say what he wants. Lu Yurong said, forgive him for a few days. Yes, put a stop to his arrogance. The maid smiled and said, we should teach him a lesson. This Chu Li was really hateful. He caused Miss to stumble a few times and made her angry. It was time to teach him a lesson and let him know that this was Green Mountain Town. Dusk came and the Titanium Temple was brightly lit. The Buddhist lamps on the pagoda were lit. The wind outside avoided these lamps, and they did not sway. The novice monks had finished their dinner and were playing in the courtyard. Seosher came out of the house and waved, young monk Suan. The novice monks, who were playing, quietened down and stared at her with wide eyes. Seosher waved, come here. Suan ran to her. Almsgiver Seo, help me move the chair out. And over there, Seosher pointed at the pagoda where they were playing. All right, Suan agreed and went into the house to move the chair out. He had strong limbs now, and it was easy for him to move the chair to the pagoda. Seosher sat on the chair and stretched her body lazily. She looked at the novice monks and chuckled. Little monks, after you heard that I took off my veil, you all tried your best to calm down. Can you do it? Lady Almsgiver, we've already seen through the charms of women. The novice monks looked at her proudly. Even if you took off your veil, we wouldn't be afraid. You're good. Seosher smiled and looked at Sue and, didn't you just recover? Why aren't you cultivating? Suan looked helpless. I still can't cultivate. Oh, you can't cultivate even when your body is healed? Seosher smiled. What's the logic behind that? Suan sighed. Master said that my connection with the mortal world is not over yet. The time to cultivate is not yet. Then when is the time? Seosher asked. Suan shook his head. Master said there's no rush. There's no rush. Don't tell me you can only cultivate when you're old. Seosher chuckled. Suan said, Master said that I'm a disciple of the Titanium Temple after all. It's just that my connection with the mortal world is not over yet. The time is not yet. There's no rush now. I'll eventually cultivate the divine powers and cultivate the 10 lifetimes of Dharma. Then listen to your master. Seosher smiled. There's nothing good about cultivating. It's fun to play like this. Look at me. I can't cultivate either, but isn't it fun too? Almsgiver Seo, you're not happy? Suan shook his head. Seosher scoffed. Nonsense. What about your parents? Were they willing to send you to the temple? Suan said, I don't have parents. Looks like they left you behind. Poor little monk. Seosher said, I'm the same. I don't have parents. Suan asked, what about Almsgiver Chu? Him. Seosher shook her head. Almsgiver Seo isn't happy. Is it because of Almsgiver Chu? Suan asked. Seosher was startled, then laughed. Oh, little monk, you know about relationships. We have to see through the nature of all living beings. Suan said, resentment, separation, pain, everything has to be freed. You're like an old man. Co sure smiled. Little monk, you don't have a mother. Do you want me to be your mother? I don't have a son yet. Having a son should be interesting. Suan's eyes widened. He was at a loss. Co sure laughed. Suan quickly shook his head, turned around, and ran. Co sure couldn't stop giggling. The novice monks looked at her in surprise, a little envious. Chapter 309. P.S. Thank you again for everyone's enthusiasm. It's the first time my birthday was so lively. Chu Li sat on the third floor of Lu Wailu, a seat by the window. He heard the inn's waiter report that the Run public house said that their lady did not meet everyone. He understood that Lu Yurong was venting her anger on him, and also to reduce his prestige. Lu Yurong was not satisfied with winning every time they fought. Now that she had such an opportunity, how could she not vent her anger? Although he knew this, he could not do anything about it. He originally came to ask for peace. It seemed that it was useless to ask for it. Lu Yurong knew his intention, but she still did it. Was she fearless and wanted to gain the upper hand in the cooperation, or did she not want to cooperate at all? Chu Li waved his hand to let the waiter go. He stood on the restaurant with his hands behind his back, looking down at the pedestrians below. Green Mountain Town was more prosperous than Chongming Town. Standing here, one could feel the prosperity. The sun was setting, and the twilight was coming. Everyone was hurrying back, busy with their own things. He sighed and turned to go down Lu Wailu. He went to a corner and disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared in the backyard of the Rin public house. Who are you? A beautiful maid turned her head and suddenly saw him. Her eyes widened and she cried out involuntarily. She never thought that there would be strangers in the backyard, other than the lady and them. She usually did not see any men. In the sea of flowers, in the woods, 9 beautiful maids suddenly jumped out and surrounded him. They stared at him with their hands on the hilt of their swords, ready to attack at any time. Chu Li glanced at them. The positions where the 9 of them stood were very particular. It was exactly the same as the positions where they cultivated the charming maiden divine technique. A faint, baleful aura rotated around their bodies. Although they looked so weak that they couldn't even stand up to a gust of wind, their killing intent was hidden. If one underestimated them, they would definitely suffer a great loss. Chu Li. Lu Yurong stood up and put the scroll on the table. Her charming face was tense. She said coldly, "You have guts." Chu Li said, "Lady Lu does not want to see me, so I have to come and see Lady Lu. You must see me." Lu Yurong slowly walked out of the pagoda. Her wide robe made her look petite. He leisurely walked up to him, looked him up and down, and nodded. "Your qinggong is indeed superb. You live up to your reputation." "Excuse me." Chu Li closed fist saluted. "I'm here to discuss something. Is this how Lady Lu treats her guests?" The 9 maids snorted. Lu Yurong said lightly, "Is this also Chief Chu's way of being a guest?" Chu Li smiled. "I was forced to do so. I really can't help it. Sophistry." Lu Yurong calmly reprimanded. "Fine, tell me, what's the matter?" Chu Li pointed at them. Lu Yurong said coldly, "If you want to say it, then say it. If you don't, then forget it. I'm already being polite by not crippling you and letting you speak." Chu Li said, "Why do you have to be so hostile? Everything can be discussed." "I want to kill you. Shall we discuss this?" Lu Yurong sneered. Chu Li said, "This is an important matter. It's better to talk about it in private. The 9 of them are all my confidants." Lu Yurong frowned and said, "Are you going to tell me or not?" Chu Li shook his head and sighed. His eyes flashed. He appeared in the pagoda and slowly sat by the stone table. "You're courting death." The 9 maids' vision blurred. Seeing him get away so easily, they were furious. They twisted their waists and wanted to rush into the pagoda. "Forget it." Lu Yurong waved her hand and said, "You can all leave." "My lady?" The maid Xiaoxing looked at Chu Li worriedly. They always thought that Chu Li was not worth mentioning. He was not a grand master and was not a threat to the lady. Now that they saw his light body technique, they felt threatened. Maybe he could really hurt the lady. Lu Yurong said, "He can't hurt me. You can leave first." Yes. The 9 maids once again disappeared into the forest and the sea of flowers. Lu Yurong's robe fluttered. She came and sat opposite Chu Li. "What's the matter?" Chu Li said, "King and is aiming for the throne. Does Lady Lu know about it?" "You just found out." Lu Yurong sneered. Chu Li pondered and said, "Lady Lu has a grudge against King, and right?" "Who said so?" Lu Yurong shook her head and said, "We have nothing to do with each other." Chu Li said, "You guys fought before. Lady Lu even injured King, and I'm impressed." Lu Yurong looked at him from head to toe. Her eyes were cold. She said, "Looks like I didn't lose unjustly. You know me very well." Chu Li said, "I had to." King En's injuries have not healed yet. He was hurt by a profound heart technique. Lady Lu hit it well, and hit it from the world. However, King En is not a magnanimous person. "I'm not afraid of his revenge." Lu Yurong said, "Are you trying to say that we should work together?" Chu Li said slowly, "King En has been dissatisfied with the High Duke's public houses for a long time. Once he inherits the throne, the first thing he will deal with is the High Duke's public houses. He will abolish them." "Where did you get your news from? You're just exaggerating." Lu Yurong disagreed. Chu Li said, "Let's not talk about whether my news is true or not. Let's talk about him inheriting the throne. He will definitely become an enlightened master. When that time comes," Lu Yurong sneered, "he wants to continue the throne. Dream on." Chu Li said, "From what I know, he has a lot of forces under him. Green Hill, Feng, Huang Mountain, Titanium Temple, and probably some other major martial arts factions." Lu Yurong waved her hand and said, "His forces are strong. They don't have a say in who becomes the emperor. The emperor has the final say. No matter how strong the forces are, they are not worth mentioning in front of the emperor. Lady Lu, why are you so sure that the emperor will not pass the throne to him? If he really wanted to, there would not be this marriage." Lu Yurong sneered. With his ruthlessness and ruthlessness, he wants to become the emperor. That's ridiculous. Humph. Chu Li smiled. "Oh, I heard that the emperor's character is similar to King," and Lu Yurong frowned and looked at him. "He knows it's impossible, but he still does it. His character is persevering. Isn't this the quality of a hero? King is cold and ruthless. He treats people like ants. He is not a good person, but he will be a good emperor." Chu Li shook his head. "I can't think of why the emperor would not choose him." Lu Yurong's face darkened. Chu Li said slowly, "Lady Lu thinks that when the emperor chooses his successor, he will first consider his character. He is afraid that it will backfire on him. She doesn't know that the emperor is already an enlightened master. What is there to be afraid of? Since there is nothing to be afraid of, there is only one standard for the person to be chosen, whether or not he is beneficial to the Lung family. He is not moved by the first beauty of the great Ji dynasty. He only cares about benefits and is unscrupulous. Is such a person not suitable to be the emperor?" Lu Yurong frowned and did not say a word. She was moved by Chu Li's words. Before this, she planned to sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight. She was sure that King An would not sit on the throne no matter what. In the end, it was all for naught. Chu Li's words suddenly made her feel that she was too careless. Even if there was a chance, she could not let King An become the ruler. Chapter 310. Lu Yurong remained silent. Chu Li said, "No matter how you think about it, Lady Lu shouldn't sit back and watch King An grow stronger. I don't know if Lady Lu has been blinded by her grudges and wants to watch my public house and King An fight." Lu Yurong glared at him coldly. Chu Li sighed. "Our public house and King An are like an innate master against a grandmaster. They are of no threat to King An. The Run public house will miss this opportunity and watch as King An grows stronger. By then, King An will have already matured, and the Rim public house will not be able to fight back. He's not that powerful." Lu Yurong scoffed. Chu Li shook his head. 2 months ago, when I first met King An, his forces were still very ordinary. But now, things are very different. His forces have exploded, and even the Titanium Temple is helping him. The 4 major sects almost never interfered in the internal struggles of the imperial family, and the Titanium Temple was even more aloof. He said this to attract Lu Yurong's attention. He had already thought it through. The foundation of the Titanium Temple was in the Outland. Even if the Titanium Temple was destroyed, they would return to the Outland and come back 100 years later to rebuild the Titanium Temple. He did not know which generation those novice monks were from. Even if they had not cultivated their divine powers, they would still return to the realm beyond heaven after death. Among these novice monks, there were very few who were not reincarnations of eminent monks. Therefore, they had no scruples and only did things for the sake of cultivation. Does the Titanium Temple really have monks helping him? Lu Yurong frowned. She also knew how powerful it was. The monks of the Titanium Temple had always been indifferent to worldly affairs and viewed the mortal world as a swamp. They rarely left the temple. This time, he actually helped King An. The meaning behind it was hard to fathom. All the monks from the Titanium Temple possessed divine powers and would not bow down to power. For King An to be able to get their help, one could not help but wonder. "Revered Sir Kong Hai almost killed me and the second lady in horse racing town," Chu Li said. "His divine might is truly astonishing." Lu Yurong stood up and supported herself against the wall, deep in thought. Chu Li said, "Now, King An must be sitting on top of the mountain and watching the tigers fight, watching our 2 residences fight. We have to clip its wings first." Lu Yurong turned around and frowned. Feng Huang Mountain and Green Hill are both under his command. Let's get rid of them first. Becoming a first-rate sect is too difficult. Chu Li shook his head. He had a rough idea of the Snow Lunar Pavilion's capabilities. They were not to be underestimated. The same went for Green Hill and Phoenix Hill. Let them kill each other until they are unable to help Prince An, Lu Yurong said. Chu Li nodded. That would work based on Lu Yurong's skills. It wasn't difficult to achieve. Normally, the 2 residences will maintain the status quo to confuse King and, if necessary, the imperial residence can send 6 grandmasters to assist you. Lu Yurong looked at him coldly. But if you take the opportunity to cause trouble, then don't blame us for being rude. Chu Li said, Lady Lu worries too much. Absolutely not. That's great, Lu Yurong said slowly. Chu Li gave a fist salute. If that's the case, I'll take my leave. There's no hurry. Lu Yurong said coldly, Let me experience Chief Chu's martial arts. As soon as she finished speaking, her robe fluttered and her jade-like hands had already reached his chest. Chu Li took a step to the side and evaded the attack. He then appeared on top of the wall, 10 feet away. I'll take my leave now. Lu Yurong stepped onto the top of the wall, but he was nowhere to be seen. Lu Yurong frowned and scoffed. Chu Li's light body technique was even scarier than the rumors said. When Chu Li returned to the Titanium Temple, it was already midnight. The lights were still on in the house. Xiao Shi was sewing clothes under the light. Chu Li was shocked. Chu Li stood in front of the bed and pointed at the monk's robe. Lady, this is... Xiao Shi raised her head and glared at him. Monk's robe? Whose monk's robe? Chu Li asked. Lady, are you going to wear a monk's robe? It's for the young monk Su, and Xiao Shi lowered her head and continued to sew. Her slender fingers were unusually agile. Silver needles shuttled between her fingers at an extremely fast speed. She had placed 3 pieces of white undergarments beside her. One was big, one was middle, and one was small. Chu Li smiled. Why did you want to make this for Suan? Xiao Shi said, the young monk Suan has no parents. He's a pitiful child. Other young monks have parents who would send clothes over from time to time. He's the only one who doesn't. Lady, it's because he was also hit by the vitality sealing finger. That's why you feel sorry for him. Chu Li smiled. Xiao Shi glared at him. No one thinks you're mute. Chu Li smiled and sat on the chair. Why did you make so many? How can one be enough? Xiao Shi scoffed. Children at this age are the most greedy. The clothes will be too small in a few days. I'll make 2 more big ones, so he can wear them in the future. Lady, you're so thoughtful. Chu Li smiled. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes. Lu Yurong agreed. Chu Li let out a sigh. He nodded slowly. Xiao Shi was surprised. You really convinced her. Chu Li said, she's also a smart person. She pointed out the pros and cons. She naturally understood that if we work together, we'll both benefit. She's not playing with you, right? Xiao Shi was still in disbelief. Lu Yurong was a vengeful woman. She was petty. How could it be so easy to convince her? Could it be that Chu Li was played by her? No. Chu Li shook his head. He knew it too. The hatred between the 2 public houses had been entangled for so many years. It was impossible to erase it all at once. Lu Yurong might have plotted against the public house, but the most crucial step had been taken. He had to take it slow in the future. You better be careful. Xiao Shi scoffed. Of course. I'll sleep over at Qingyan town. Chu Li said, I'll go too. Xiao Shi said. Chu Li said, forget it. I'll stay here. I'll go outside and try to understand the all-seeing sky and earth. Xiao Shi glared at him. Get out. Chu Li smiled and left the house. He came to a pagoda and meditated. The light on the pagoda was not affected by the night wind. His mind gradually sank. He activated the omniscient mirror and began to understand the all-seeing divine power. Understanding the limb of God was very beneficial to understanding the all-seeing sky and earth. The all-seeing divine power also broke through the shackles of space. It was similar to the limb of God. However, one was a physical leap while the other was a sensory leap. Unknowingly, a night had passed. He sat under the pagoda without moving. In the morning light, a group of novice monks had already come out to practice. They practiced a fist technique and then started to play around. They came in 2s and 3s or groups of 7 or 5. Seeing Chu Li sitting there like a statue, they did not disturb him. They pretended not to see anything. This was a common scene in the temple. Young monk Suan, come here. Xiao Shi pushed open the door. She wore a veil and only revealed her deep eyes. She waved her hand. Come here for a moment. Suan ran over. His face was red, and he did not dare to look at her. He pressed his palms together. Almsgiver Xiao, you really don't want to acknowledge me As your mother? Seosher asked with a smile. Suan lowered his head. All right, young monk, take the bundle on the Kong bed. It's for you. Seosher smiled. Suan quickly waved his hand. Seosher frowned. Why? You don't want to listen to me anymore? Suan was troubled. How can I take something from you? Really? Gather? Mei xiao mi, pa luminyo bainyo, desolate, head chariot knocks broken bones to ashes? Yong yong zheng. Yes, thank you, almsgiver Seo. Suan pressed his palms together. Quickly take it away. Seosher waved her hand. Suan took the bundle and left in a hurry. Chapter 3:11. P.S. Fifth on the recommendation list, ascending to the heavens in a single bound. You guys are too awesome. The round mirror in Chu Li's mind flickered slightly. Every scripture was glowing. The pagoda suddenly shot out a ray of golden light. The Sarira prayer beads in his hand also condensed into a ray of golden light. The two of them gathered behind his head and condensed into a ball of light. It was like a mirror standing upright behind his head. The novice monks immediately looked over. It's time to cultivate the divine power. It's a divine power. They discussed softly and looked at Chu Li excitedly. Chu Li's expression became more solemn. Seosher shook her head. It seemed that he had comprehended the all-seeing divine power. If the monks from the Titanium Temple saw this, what would they think? Would they insist on accepting him into the temple? The golden light behind his head suddenly shrunk and turned into a ray of light that drilled into Chu Li's forehead. Where is the thought that moves the heart? Condense the will in front of you. Chu Li softly chanted and slowly opened his eyes. It's done. The novice monks looked at him excitedly. Seosher smiled. You've cultivated it? Chu Li smiled. Yes. The withered old monk from before slowly walked over and bowed with pressed palms. Almsgiver Chu, congratulations. Chu Li bowed with pressed palms and smiled. Thank you, revered sir. Almsgiver Chu has comprehended the divine power. The old monk said, Fate has ended. It's time for you to return. Chu Li replied, Yes, I will leave today. The old monk nodded and slowly left. You're chasing me away so soon. Seosher frowned. I wanted to stay for a few more days. Chu Li smiled. Young revered Sir Suan? The little monk is shy. Seosher smiled. I said I wanted to recognize him as my son, but he didn't want to. Chu Li laughed. You really dare to dream. Seosher said, I like this little monk very much. Too bad he's leaving soon. All good things must come to an end. He has to leave eventually. Chu Li said, Young revered Sir Suan is someone who is going to become a Buddha. Suan was intelligent. He would definitely be successful in his cultivation in the future. What Buddha? His master said he can't cultivate now. Seosher pouted. He said his fate with the mortal world is not over yet. Chu Li was surprised. Looks like we'll still be able to see him. I wonder what kind of mortal fate it is. Seosher scoffed. There's no point in talking. Pack up and let's go, Chu Li said. Seosher returned to her house and packed her bag. The two of them pushed open the courtyard door. He stepped out and left the Titanium Temple. Seosher walked down the stairs and suddenly turned around. The courtyard door was pushed open, and Suan walked out. Seosher smiled. Little monk, cultivate well. I'll come back to see you when I have the chance. Suan solemnly pressed his palms together and bowed, his small face solemn. Benefactor Xiao should be happier, and throw away your worries. All right. Seosher smiled and waved her hand. Chu Li held onto Seosher's wrist, and both of them disappeared in a flash. Suan stood quietly in front of the courtyard gate, staring at it without moving. After a long while, he turned back into the courtyard and slowly closed the temple gate. He went back to his room, took out a bundle from under the bookshelf, and took out 6 sets of clothes, 3 inner garments, and 3 monk robes. The stitches were very fine. After looking at it for a while, he touched it again, carefully put it away, and tied the bag, put it back into the bookcase, the imperial residence of King, and was brightly lit as if it was daytime. The skinny elder Ding Jian quietly came to the study room and said softly, "Your Highness, the person has been found." The study room was brightly lit, but the courtyard was not. Ding Jian was hidden in the darkness. "Oh." King opened the window and revealed his handsome face. "When did he arrive?" "Just arrived. He has been settled in an inconspicuous courtyard." Ding Jian said. King thought for a while. "Bring him here." "Yes." Ding Jian nodded. King said, "No third person is allowed to know." "Don't worry, Your Highness. I am the only one handling this matter. No one else knows." Ding Jian quickly said. "Very well. Go." King nodded. Ding Jian closed fist saluted and left. King sat in the study room and closed the window, deep in thought. Not far from him stood a chubby young monk. He looked simple and honest. It was Su Ning from the Titanium Temple. "Revered sir, the person I am looking for is a fortune teller." King said, "He is very accurate. He can see the past and the future." Su Ning asked, "Your Highness, why are you looking for this person?" "I am still worried." King shook his head and said, "Are you going to marry Second Lady Xiao or not?" Master Senior Kong Jing would never lie. Su Ning shook his head and said, King said, "I am not doubting revered Sir Kong Jing, but I cannot listen to only one person. This is my rule." Su Ning's expression did not change. This fortune teller must have a great divine power. King smiled. He is an extraordinary person among the people. He can judge yin and yang, good or bad luck. He has a great reputation. Su Ning shook his head and said slowly, "Unless one cultivates the eye of the sky to see through fate that may not be the case. Buddhism has the eye of the sky, but Taoism is better at seeing a person's fate and judging good or bad luck." King smiled. "Amitabha Buddha." Su Ning chanted the name of Buddha, took a step back, and said no more. Princeton was all smiles. He did not mind. Not long after, Ding Jian brought a man in a black robe into the courtyard where the study room was. After entering the courtyard, Ding Jian helped him take off his outer black robe, revealing a green Taoist robe. This middle-aged man's face was like jade. He had 3 strands of beard on his chin. His appearance was thin. He held a feather fan in his hand. He gently waved it twice. Suddenly he looked like an immortal, as if he had transcended the mortal world. "Your Highness, Mr. Yuan is here." Ding Jian said softly, "Invite Mr. Yuan in for a chat." King's voice was heard. Ding Jian smiled and said, "Mr. Yuan, please." Mr. Yuan closed fist, saluted, his gait elegant, and walked into the study room. The lights were as bright as day. King sat behind the wide study table, quietly looking at him, his eyes so deep that they seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. After entering the room, Mr. Yuan closed fist saluted. He was neither humble nor arrogant. "Greetings, Your Royal Highness." "Mr. Yuan, I have heard a lot about you," King said in a deep voice. "I invited you here to help me see good luck." Mr. Yuan scanned the room. There was only a young monk standing by the side. There was no one else. Mr. Yuan closed fist saluted and smiled. "I am not talented, and Your Royal Highness is also a noble life. I am afraid that my ability is not enough, and there might be mistakes." His expression was carefree, and his words were open and above board. He. King waved his hand and smiled. "You don't have to be so polite, Mr. Yuan. I have always been curious, and I am very interested in these things, whether I can tell good or bad luck. And how far I can see, a while ago, my future wife was seen by a master, and he said that she was beyond words, but I did not believe it. Mr. Yuan carefully looked at Kingen and did not say a word. What did you see, Mr. Yuan? Kingen asked. Your Royal Highness, the stars are moving, and you are indeed about to get married, Mr. Yuan muttered. But, Mr. Yuan, please speak your mind, whether it is good or bad. I will not blame you. Kingen smiled. Fortune-tellers liked to say shocking things to confuse the mind, and he was very familiar with these common tricks. Mr. Yuan sighed. Your Royal Highness, it is better not to say. Is there a bloody disaster for me? Kingen frowned. Mr. Yuan said, if it is, as I say, your Royal Highness should not get married. Oh. Kingen sat up straight, leaned forward, and smiled. I would like to hear the details. Mr. Yuan sighed. It is better for your Royal Highness to not meet this noble. What do you mean? Kingen stared at him. Mr. Yuan said, this noble's life is too hard. I am afraid that your Royal Highness. Chapter 3:12. P.S. The craziest birthday ever. I'll remember it. Thank you. Counter. Kingen's brows furrowed. Mr. Yuan nodded slowly. She counters me? Kingen asked. Mr. Yuan sighed. The noblewoman's destiny is too precious. Normal people can't afford it. Does that mean I'm a normal person? Kingen sneered. Mr. Yuan shook his head. Your Royal Highness, although you're a descendant of the Emperor, your destiny is inferior to the noblewoman's. It's best not to marry her. How dare you, Mr. Yuan? Kingen laughed out of anger. It was the first time he heard someone say that his destiny was inferior to the noblewoman's. Mr. Yuan was certain that he would never be able to become one of the 9 kings. Thinking of this, his face was so gloomy that it could drip water. The air in the study room seemed to have frozen. Mr. Yuan was unperturbed and continued, Your Royal Highness, if you want to protect yourself, don't marry the noblewoman. My words are sincere. I hope your Royal Highness will consider them. The wedding is about to take place, and you're asking me to cancel it? Kingen scoffed. Mr. Yuan sighed. That's the only way. What if I marry her? Kingen sneered. Mr. Yuan shook his head. I'm afraid your Royal Highness won't be able to enjoy the rest of your life. Does that mean I'll die a violent death? You might not die a violent death. You might be weak and sick. Ha! I'm a grandmaster. Sick. Your Royal Highness, even a celestial will deteriorate, let alone a mortal's body. Kingen waved his hand. I understand. Either way, you'll die a horrible death. Mr. Yuan sighed and said helplessly, if I didn't have my own rules, I wouldn't have said these things. I'll get myself killed. What kind of person do you think I am? Kingen said coldly. Mr. Yuan, speak your mind. I won't blame you. Thank you for your magnanimity, your Royal Highness. Mr. Yuan closed fist saluted. He said boldly, Your Royal Highness, the purple clouds above your head are supposed to be an auspicious sign. Unfortunately, the purple clouds are too thick, and it's damaging your Royal Highness' luck. The only thing you can do now is to stay away from the noblewoman. What will happen to me if she dies? Kingen asked. Mr. Yuan stroked his beard and shook his head. It's unpredictable. This noble was indescribably noble and naturally had the power of heaven and earth to protect him. Falling into a hopeless situation and coming back to life, there will always be someone to help and avert danger. Your Highness, it's best for you to stay far away. Prince Anne's expression was uncertain. He thought of Co. Sher's vitality-sealing finger and her resurrection from the dead. If it was someone else, they would have died a long time ago. Yet she was living better and better. Her body had already recovered. In fact, After consuming the longevity grass, one's lifespan would far exceed that of ordinary people. All the signs indicated that she had monstrous luck and was definitely not an ordinary person. From the looks of it, it was clear that this person was an extremely noble person, and all of his methods were useless. So you're saying that we can't kill her? Mr. Yuan shook his head and sighed. It would be best if you don't kill them. Otherwise, if you were to be repelled by the energy of the world, I'm afraid that… Mr. Yuan, do you have a solution? King An was starting to believe his words. Mr. Yuan said, Your Highness has fallen into a disadvantageous situation. There's really no good way to resolve this. Canceling the wedding is the best plan. What's the harm in canceling the wedding? King An asked. Mr. Yuan muttered, I'm afraid that it would be an external force. It can't be cancelled. King An frowned and thought of his father and mother. His mother would never allow him to cancel the wedding. She was most satisfied with Xiao Shi. Once Mr. Yuan said this, the first thing his mother would do was to kill him. What else? King An asked. Kill the noble. Mr. Yuan shook his head. That's even harder. How about we get someone else to do it? King An asked. He thought of using the Rin public house to kill Xiao Shi, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Mr. Yuan sighed. I'm afraid that if we can't kill the noble, we'll be harmed instead. There's another plan. Say it. King An quickly said. Your Highness can disperse your skills, disperse your forces, and live in seclusion in the forest. You can give up your delusions and return to simplicity. Naturally, you'll be able to secure a lifetime of riches and honor. Mr. Yuan said, the noble will also become your Highness's noble, and your riches and honor will continue. King An sneered and stared at him. Mr. Yuan, you sure know how to joke. Mr. Yuan sighed. If that's the case, then I'm left with the worst plan, to kill the noble. It's late at night, and I'm tired. Ding Jian, send Mr. Yuan back. King An yawned and ordered, I'll talk to Mr. Yuan another day. Mr. Yuan, please don't leave, so that I can learn from you from time to time. Mr. Yuan closed fist saluted, waved his feather fan twice, and followed Ding Jian out. His actions were elegant and refined. Watching them leave, King An turned to look at Su Ning. Su Ning stood there blankly, motionless like a Buddha statue. He seemed to be in a daze, without a trace of intelligence. Revered sir? King An asked. Su Ning pressed his palms together. This Mr. Yuan is from the Li dynasty. King An's expression changed. A spy from the Li dynasty? An eccentric person from the Li dynasty, Su Ning said. So, how trustworthy are his words? King An frowned. Su Ning said, 90% true, 10% false. What's his purpose? King An scoffed. He only needed to know his purpose. Once his purpose was clear, he would know which words were true and which were false. Su Ning said, He'll use your Royal Highness to weaken the High Duke's public houses and cause chaos in the martial arts world. The Li dynasty will then take the opportunity to invade. The Li dynasty's martial arts world will be the vanguard. First, they will create chaos in the Ji dynasty's martial arts world, with the High Duke's public houses to suppress them. The imperial court will not be able to extinguish the fire. This is the perfect time for the Li dynasty's cavalry to invade. King An's expression changed drastically. If that was the case, then the Ji dynasty would be in danger. What a vicious method. King An said coldly. Su Ning said, the great ancestor established the 12 High Dukes' public houses. His wisdom is boundless. King An stared at him coldly. Revered sir, are you advising me not to touch the High Duke's public houses? I'm only expressing my opinion. I won't advise your Royal Highness on what to do. Su Ning said, everything is up to your Royal Highness. King An's expression softened. He scoffed. How could I not know that the 12 High Dukes' public houses are the pillars of the country? Our ancestors established the 12 High Dukes' public houses with good intentions, but people's hearts change. Now, the High Dukes' public houses are too powerful to be dealt with. Not only did they not suppress the forces of the martial arts world within their borders, they allowed them to grow, and even colluded with the sects of the martial arts world. In this way, if a few of the High Dukes' public houses join forces, the ancestral foundation will be destroyed. With the emperor around, Your Royal Highness is worrying too much, Su Ning said, not in position, not in politics. Now, a few of the High Dukes' public houses have the tendency to join forces. Even if they don't rebel, they will be pressuring us, Kingen said coldly. If the imperial court does not issue a decree, in the long run, the world will be in chaos. Su Ning shook his head. Kingen scoffed. Revered sir, you don't agree with me? The emperor is wise and mighty. If your Royal Highness can see it, how could the emperor not? Su Ning pressed his palms together calmly, bowed towards the direction of the imperial house, and said, The emperor is an enlightened master. Why doesn't he make a decision? Kingen said, No matter how wise father is, there will always be times when he makes a mistake. Su Ning shook his head. Not in position, not in politics. Your Royal Highness is looking at the problem from your position, not from the emperor's position. With an enlightened master, which High Duke's public house would dare to rebel? Your Royal Highness is worrying too much. Chapter 3:13. After a while, Princeton said, Mr. Yuan's words can't be trusted, but there is some truth to it. Su Ning took a step back and stopped talking. Princeton pressed on the wide desk and sneered, Even if we don't kill Second Lady Seo, we can't let Chu Li live. Chu Li had ruined his plans several times. If he was here, he would continue to ruin his plans. It was better to move this kind of person away from Seo Shi as soon as possible. If not, he would be a big problem when he enters the public house. Princeton thought about this and said, Meng Ji. Yes. A low voice came from outside the courtyard. I'm here. Go and let Yu Jintao kill Chu Li. Princeton said, Isn't he called Duan Li Dao? This name is good. It can break Chu Li. Why aren't you going? Princeton scoffed. Meng Ji said in the courtyard, Your Royal Highness Duan Li Dao only promised to do one thing for you, to return the favor. Just for Chu Li. You need him. Yes, that's it. Princeton said coldly, Tell him that Chu Li's light body technique is excellent. If he can't win, he will run. If he doesn't want to run, he has to land a hit. It's best to deal with the people Chu Li cares about first. Please tell me, Your Royal Highness, Meng Ji said. Princeton said, Doesn't Chu Li value his Leisure Cloud pub? He also values his little maid very much. Let Yu Jintao kill a few people from the Leisure Cloud pub first, or kill his little maid. Chu Li will deliver himself to him. He won't run away. Yes, thank you, Your Royal Highness. Meng Ji said, I'll go now. Oh, yeah, Princeton scoffed. How's the progress on the public house? Meng Ji hesitated. Why, it's not going well. Princeton said coldly. Meng Ji lowered his head and said helplessly, I'm useless. What happened? Princeton frowned. You've always been successful. Why isn't it going well this time? Your Royal Highness, the public house's glories, courtyard is too powerful. All the guards are afraid and don't dare to agree. Meng Ji sighed. No matter how much money we give, or even using the lives of our relatives to threaten them, it won't help. Glory's courtyard. Princeton said coldly, Chu Li is the chief of Glory's courtyard. Exactly. Meng Ji said, There's nothing the Glory's courtyard doesn't know of. Even the grandmasters were crippled of their martial arts and chased out of the residence. The people of the public house firmly believe that as long as you are a spy, You will never be able to escape the glories we'll institute. Chu Li. Princeton sneered. He's a talent, but too bad. He can't be used by me. All the more reason to kill him. Go. Yes. Meng Ji flashed into the darkness. King glanced at Su Ning. Su Ning stood there motionlessly. He didn't seem to have heard this. Wearing a black robe, Mr. Yuan left the prince's mansion with Ding Jian and returned to a small courtyard not far from the prince's mansion. The small courtyard was located in a corner of the divine capital. It was the most ordinary and inconspicuous residence. Mr. Yuan, there are guards outside. If you need anything, just let them know. Ding Jian sent him to the entrance of the courtyard and said in a low voice, "But it's best if Mr. Yuan doesn't leave this place, lest the people outside recognize you and bring criticism to His Highness." "I understand." Mr. Yuan smiled and cupped his hands. "I won't make things difficult for Brother Ding." "Haha, all right." Ding Jian's skinny face broke into a smile. "If there's anything, just tell the guards. They will inform me, and I will take care of it myself." "Thank you, Brother Ding." "You're welcome. I'll be counting on Mr. Yuan to take care of me in the future." Ding Jian's smile widened. "Take care of each other." Mr. Yuan cupped his hands. After Ding Jian left, Mr. Yuan slowly walked into the courtyard. He sat by the stone table and looked at the bright moon. He let out a long sigh. He wondered if the moon in his hometown was as bright as this. What were his son and wife doing? Were they asleep? Would they think of him in their dreams? He sighed in melancholy. The faces of his son and wife appeared in his mind. Being in the great Ji dynasty, he was tense every day. He would have to live like this for the next 3 years. He stared at the bright moon for a long time. He slowly returned to his house. Just as he was about to light the lamp, his expression suddenly changed. He shouted at the shadow, "Who's there?" "Mr. Yuan, light the lamp." A calm man's voice was heard. "Who is it?" Mr. Yuan frowned. Judging from the voice, the person was indeed on the bed. He had never heard this voice before. "You'll know once you light the lamp." Mr. Yuan lit the lamp and saw a young man sitting on the bed. He was spirited and heroic. "I'm Chu Li." Chu Li cupped his hands. Mr. Yuan was shocked. "You're Chu Li." Chu Li said, "It seems that Mr. Yuan knows me. It's my honor." "What brings you here, Master Chu?" Mr. Yuan asked. He knew that Chu Li's light body technique was top-notch, but he did not expect it to be this powerful. Chu Li said, "I've heard about your conversation with King," and Mr. Yuan's expression changed. This meant that Chu Li had snuck into the imperial residence without anyone knowing. His light body technique was even more shocking. What was more terrifying was that he could sneak into both the imperial residence of the Ji dynasty and the imperial residence of the Li dynasty. He was definitely a dangerous person. Chu Li asked, "Are you trying to kill me, Mr. Yuan?" Mr. Yuan's heart skipped a beat. "I'm just surprised. I didn't expect Master Chu to have such light body technique." Chu Li said, "Mr. Yuan is a top-notch fortune teller. Why don't you let me read your fortune?" Mr. Yuan looked Chu Li up and down and frowned. Chu Li asked, "Is there something wrong with my fortune teller?" "Master Chu, your fortune teller is very good," Mr. Yuan said. "Your life has been smooth sailing, and your wishes have come true." Chu Li laughed. "How can there be such a good thing?" Mr. Yuan frowned and nodded. "Your fortune is indeed strange. I can't read it." Chu Li asked, "Which faction are you from, Mr. Yuan?" "Hee, I've been under the tutelage of a wandering Taoist since I was young. I don't belong to any faction. I'm just a person from the mountains." Mr. Yuan shook his head. He sat at the table and relaxed. "That's rare." Chu Li's eyes lit up. "What about your family, Mr. Yuan. Sigh. Mr. Yuan looked melancholic and shook his head. They're all gone. I'm wandering the world alone. Oh, Chu Li said, that can't be right. Mr. Yuan's family isn't around, but they're still alive. Why do you say so? Mr. Yuan smiled. Mr. Yuan's name is Yuan Kuai, right? Chu Li smiled. Mr. Yuan's smile froze. Yuan Kuai was his original name, from the Li dynasty. He had never used it since he came to the Ji dynasty. He stared at Chu Li. Yuan Kuai? I've never heard of it before. Where have you heard of this name? Master Chu. The Li dynasty also has a top-notch fortune teller, Yuan Kuai. Chu Li smiled. That must be you, Mr. Yuan? Have you been to the Li dynasty, Master Chu? Yuan Kuai asked calmly. Chu Li answered, Never. Then how do you know about Yuan Kuai? I've heard of him. Chu Li smiled. The Li dynasty is collecting information about the Ji dynasty, so the Ji dynasty wouldn't be idle either. I didn't expect such a famous fortune teller to work for the imperial court, Yuan Kuai said. I don't understand what you're saying. Master Chu, you're probably threatening me with your family? Chu Li asked. If your family was here, would you still work for the Li dynasty? I'm just a person from the mountains. Who is the Li dynasty, and who is the Ji dynasty has nothing to do with me. Yuan Kuai said. Chu Li nodded slowly. If that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish, Mr. Yuan. Mr. Yuan, do you have any belongings of your wife or children? It'd be best if it's something like hair. Yuan Kuai shook his head. I don't understand what you're saying, Master. Then I'll have to offend you. Chu Li pointed his finger. Yuan Kuai froze. He had sealed his martial arts to avoid detection, so he could not undo it in time. He was defenseless. Chu Li took out a letter from Yuan Kuai. There was a lock of hair in the letter. Chu Li sat on the bed, wrapped the lock of hair around his finger, and activated the all-seeing divine power. A moment later, he disappeared from the bed. Chapter 3:14. After about the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Chu Li appeared out of thin air, with a letter in his hand. He unsealed the man's acupuncture point with a finger and passed the letter to him. Is this from the madam? Yuan Kuai took the letter doubtfully. He took it out and glanced at it. His expression changed slightly. He could naturally recognize his wife's handwriting. Furthermore, the two of them had agreed on a secret code beforehand. Others would not be able to tell, and only the two of them would know if it was real or fake. This was indeed a letter from his wife. Chu Li said, If you want to break free from the Li dynasty's control, I can bring Madam and young Master out immediately. Yuan Kuai glanced through the letter and heaved a long sigh of relief, shaking his head. Chu Li said, You know who I am? Yuan Kuai put the letter away and kept it close to his chest. Chu Li said, Do you think that the Li dynasty will have a way to assassinate you if you hide in the public house? Yuan Kuai thought about it and shook his head. He was the chief of the Li dynasty's spies in the Great Ji dynasty. He had personally sent out spies to the public houses and the imperial residences. All the residences were obedient except for the public house. All the spies were chased out of the public house, and none of them succeeded. Although he was shocked, he did not report to his superiors. There were 12 public houses and 8 imperial residences, so one public house would not make a difference. Moreover, the public house was declining, so there was nothing to worry about. Chu Li looked at Yuan Kuai, who was as calm as ever, and thought even more highly of him. This person was indeed a true talent. On one hand, he was skilled in the art of spying, and on the other hand, he was a top-notch fortune teller. He really couldn't bear to let go of such a talent. Moreover, As long as he held on to his wife and child, he would be able to control him. Chu Li had the omniscient mirror, so he could see through Yuan Kuai-hai's thoughts at any time, so he was not afraid that Yuan Kuai-hai would play tricks on him. Chu Li said, "Your wife and children have entered the house of Haiduk. You don't have to worry about their safety anymore." Yuan Kuai-hai said in a deep voice, "What do you want me to do?" He had no intention of rebelling. He was willing to give his life to the princess of the Li dynasty and Chu Li, no matter how he looked at it. The princess of the Li dynasty was superior, although he hated her to the core. He thought about it rationally. He still had to bow his head and be loyal. However, Chu Li's divine power just now made him shudder, so he did not dare to reject him outright. With such supernatural power, killing his wife and children would be as easy as flipping his hand. It could cost them their lives. "You don't have to betray the Li dynasty. Just do me a favor," Chu Li said. "What is it?" Yuan Kuai-hai stared at him warily. Chu Li said, "Let the servants in the imperial residence of King and plant a type of grass. This type of grass is not poisonous, and it won't kill people either. It will only make people a little more excited. It's something to liven things up." Yuan Kuai-hai asked, "Is it really not fatal?" "King and is a grandmaster." Chu Li said, "Do you think the poison can get close to him?" "I agree to this." Yuan Kuai-hai said, solemnly, "You mean we don't know each other anymore?" Chu Li smiled. "Mr. Yuan, do you think you can fool King and—" "What do you mean?" Yuan Kuai-hai asked. "Have you seen The Little Monk by King An's side?" "Yes." "You know his identity?" "I do not know." Chu Li sighed. "He's Su Ning from the Titanium Temple. He possesses the eye of insight." Yuan Kuai-hai's face darkened. Chu Li laughed. "You've been smart all your life, but you've made such a mistake. You've underestimated the Ji dynasty and King and— How is that possible?" Yuan Kuai-hai frowned. If he knew the monk's identity, he would not have been so bold. He wanted to meet King and personally to understand his character, so that he could make use of him in the future. He did not want to be the victim of his own cleverness. He had underestimated the Ji dynasty from the bottom of his heart. He had been in the Ji dynasty for 2 years. Everything he saw was extravagant and ostentatious. The people's hearts were in chaos, and they could not withstand a single blow. If the Li dynasty's iron cavalry attacked, the Ji dynasty would be doomed. This underestimation made him make a bold decision to meet King and personally and provoke him to continue targeting the Haiduk's public house. That inconspicuous, stupid monk was the divine monk from the Titanium Temple. He had the eye of insight. Chu Li got off the bed and stood up. "Mr. Yuan, if you don't believe me, you can verify it. I'll take my leave first." "Wait," Yuan Kuai-hai hurriedly said. Chu Li turned to look at him. "Did you change your mind, Mr. Yuan?" Yuan Kuai-hai said sincerely, "Please save me, young Master Chu." Chu Li nodded. "I can save you, but if you don't suffer, I'm afraid you won't believe me. It's better to verify it yourself. There's no need." Yuan Kuai-hai quickly said, "As the head of spies, it was important for him to be decisive. It would not be too late to verify it after he had escaped. Why should he verify it before believing?" He hurriedly said, "Please save me, young Master Chu." Chu Li coughed softly and looked at him with a smile. "Then your life belongs to me." Chu Li said, "I'll take a few strands of your hair." Yuan Kuai-hai pulled out a few strands of hair and passed them to Chu Li. Chu Li took it. "With this item, I'll be able to use it. With this, I can find you at the ends of the earth. Do you know what divine power this is?" "All-seeing divine power. Are you from the Titanium Temple?" Yuan Kuai-hai smiled bitterly. "Although I'm not a disciple of the Titanium Temple, I have some connections. Otherwise, I wouldn't know about Su Ning's divine power." Chu Li smiled. I'm willing to serve you. Yuan Kuai fist saluted. He sighed in his heart. Even if he was not as good as the princess, he could only rely on him. The lives of his family of 3 were in his hands. Moreover, if he really entered the High Duke's public house, the princess would not be able to do anything to him. Chu Li said, You don't have to betray the Li dynasty. Yuan Kuai's eyes widened. He thought he heard it wrong. Chu Li said, Do what you're supposed to do. Pretend you don't know me. I'll occasionally ask you for information. If you tell me honestly, I'll consider it a favor. All right. Yuan Kuai nodded. Chu Li lifted his arm and disappeared into the house. The 2 of them appeared outside the fairy's capital. Yuan Kuai looked at the majestic city under the moonlight. He was shocked. It was not light body technique, but divine power. Chu Li said, Mr. Yuan is also a grandmaster. It won't be hard for you to escape. Let's split up. Thank you, young master. Yuan Fist saluted. We're helping each other. There's no need to thank me. I'll send the seeds over another day. Chu Li said. All right. Yuan Kuai said. Chu Li waved his hand and disappeared in front of him. The next moment, he appeared in his courtyard in the High Duke's public house. Ever since he cultivated the Shinto's limbs, he would go to the imperial residence of King, and every day, if you know your enemy and yourself, you will never be defeated. King and had Su Ning by his side. Su Ning had the Saraira prayer beads. He could not see through King An's thoughts, but he could hear his words. If it was someone else, Su Ning would be able to sense it. However, Chu Li also had the Saraira prayer beads, which blocked Su Ning's senses. King An's injury was still there, but it had worsened. He still could not find the cure for the Empyrean fairy power. There were so many elixirs in the Forbidden Palace, but they still could not do anything to the Empyrean fairy power. This made Chu Li shiver. He had to be careful of Lu Yurong in the future. When he fought with her, he had to be 120% alert. It would be best if he did not fight with her. He did not have the intention to assassinate King and himself. He would not do it unless it was absolutely necessary. If he killed King, and he would lose his life. Chapter 3:15. Young Master, we've finally found it. The door to the courtyard was pushed open. Xue Ling, who was dressed in a snow-white gown, walked in gracefully, bringing with her a cold fragrance. The more beautiful Xue Ling became, the colder her temperament became. During this period of time, she had been advancing bravely, and her crescent formula had advanced at an extremely fast pace. She deeply felt that her kung fu was not strong enough. She could not help the young master and would instead become a burden. With the help of the concentration talisman, her kung fu had improved by leaps and bounds. She had almost reached the peak of the innate realm and was about to break through to the next level. She entered the gazebo and handed a cloth bag to Chu Li. This is the seed of the senseless grass. Chu Li took the cloth bag, opened it, and nodded in satisfaction. Let's try planting it first. Xue went to brew a cup of tea and served it with both hands. What is this senseless grass used for? You haven't looked into it. Chu Li smiled faintly. Xue Ling was a little embarrassed. She pursed her lips and chuckled. It doesn't seem to have any other effects. It can only liven things up a little. Who would use this? Chu Li replied, I have my own use for it. Master, do you really want to build a new moon brothel in the fairies' capital? What did they say? Chu Li took a sip of tea and walked out of the pavilion. He went to the side of the Glories Will tree and planted 2 seeds. The sesame-sized seeds were scattered into the spiritual soil. Xue then scooped up a ladle of water and gently splashed some water on the soil. Chu Li activated the scripture of life and death, and the spiritual energy of the Glories Will tree was transferred over. As the annual rings of the Glories Will tree grew, its spiritual energy became purer and purer, and its effect on the growth of spiritual herbs and flowers became more prominent. The spiritual energy of the Glories Will tree and the aura of Chu Li's scripture of life and death overlapped. Very quickly, two small buds emerged from the spirit soil. The Tower Master is a little doubtful. There are many forces in the divine capital. She's afraid that she won't be able to hold her ground. The second lady is here. If it's really not possible, I'll come back, Chu Li said as he activated the life and death scripture. The courtyard he was in was almost exactly the same as the Skysol courtyard on the Jade Guardian Island. It made people feel as if they were still on the Jade Guardian Island. I'll talk to the owner again. Shui lowered her head and watched as the senseless grass grew bigger bit by bit. 2 hours later, it had already grown to the length of an index finger. It looked just like ordinary grass. Is it really the senseless herb? Shui raised her head and asked, Did I take the wrong one? It's just grass. Chu Li said, Smell it. Is there any smell? Shui moved closer and sniffed. She wrinkled her nose and said, It's a little weird. It tastes different from grass. It's indeed different. Shui Ling nodded. If this thing is planted in the grass, no one will be able to recognize it. Chu Li said, That's why it's so amazing. But this grass isn't harmful. Shui said, No one takes it seriously. It's not poisonous. Chu Li nodded. It will only make people more excited. Shui Ling tilted her head and looked at him. Chu Li smiled and did not say anything else. The senseless grass soon began to grow seeds and slowly withered. Within 2 hours, it was a cycle. Chu Li collected more seeds and filled a cloth sack completely. In the middle of the night, Yuan Kuai was handling some documents in his house. Every piece of information that came from all over the Ji dynasty was gathered here. He had to sort them out and file them. Important news was reported. There were 2 grandmasters outside the house, but he was alone in the house. Chu Li suddenly appeared. Yuan Kuai raised his head to look at him, concealing his surprise. Chu Li passed him a cloth sack. This is the senseless grass. You can try planting it first. Yuan Kuai took it. Chu Li asked, Is there any news about the Duan Li Dao? The Duan Li Dao. Hold on, let me look for it, Yuan Kuai said. As he spoke, he pressed a switch, and a secret room slowly opened up. He entered the secret room and quickly took out a dossier and passed it to Chu Li. This is all the information about the Duan Li Dao. This person is very powerful. Chu Li took it. He flipped through it and frowned. The Duan Li Dao. This person is a Lone Ranger. He only kills evil people in his life. The number of evil people that died under his blade is not less than the infamous White Shroud Shindao, Yuan Kuai said. He has no evil deeds in his life. Chu Li sighed. Yes, Yuan Kuai said. He's a rare hero. Kingen is so lucky. Chu Li scoffed. Duan Li Dao was saved by Kingen once, and he promised to do something for him. Now, this promise was used on him. Yuan Kuai said, This person's blade technique is extremely sharp. 1 slash and life is decided. He doesn't need a second strike. It's similar to the White Shroud Shindao. Chu Li slowly said, All right, I'll be careful. He passed the dossier to Yuan Kuai and disappeared. In the evening, the setting sun shrouded the entire public house. Chu Li and Shui Ling left his island. As soon as they stepped on the boat, a small boat floated towards them. Yang Su was rowing the boat. A graceful figure stood at the bow of the boat. She wore a bluish-white gown and a white veil. It was Xiao. Yang Su hurriedly waved her hand. Chief. Chu Li urged the boat towards them and closed fist saluted. Yang Su smiled and said, Zongguan. Chief, what a coincidence. Lady Seoshur is heading to the island. Chu Li said, if Lady Seoshur has any orders, just let me know. Can I come and take a look? Where are you going? Seoshur asked. We're going to the town. I have the same intention. Let's go together. All right, Chu Li smiled. Seoshur scoffed. You don't seem to be willing. I'm afraid that someone will have their eyes on Lady Seoshur. Chu Li said, give them an opportunity. If we can be assassinated in the town. Seoshur shook her head. Then people will really doubt the strength of our public house. You're afraid of that, right? Chu Li laughed. He did not deny it. The public house was weak now. Anyone could see that the martial arts factions were ready to make a move. Oh, right. Big Brother was furious today. I think a faction was destroyed. Seoshur said. It was a big deal. Destroyed. Chu Li frowned. Yes, Big Brother said that the faction was a mix of good and bad. But it was too much to destroy it. There were many innocent people. Who did it? We didn't find out. That's why Big Brother was angry. Seoshur shook her head. Chu Li laughed. If Master Seoshur heard this, he would definitely be angry. Lady Seoshur, could it be the White Shroud Shindao? Yang Su said. I heard that the White Shroud Shindao specializes in destroying factions. He's already destroyed more than 10 of them. Seoshur disagreed. Why would he come here? Xue Ling looked at Chu Li. Chu Li gave her a look, telling her not to say anything. Xue Ling closed her red lips. She was afraid that she could not help but say it. The White Shroud Shindao's fame was getting more and more famous. But no one knew that the White Shroud Shindao was her master. Her master hid his skills and fame. It really made her heart itch. They went straight to the Leisure Cloud pub. The Leisure Cloud pub was quiet, but it was very lively inside. There were women walking around like butterflies. The whole pub was filled with a charming atmosphere. Sitting here and drinking, it felt like time passed very quickly. The mood was very good. It was more pleasant than going to those restaurants, and specifically looking for girls to accompany them. Chu Li waved his hand. He gestured to Qin Shui and the others not to move. They could do it themselves. It was Seoshur's first time here. She had heard about the women that Chu Li saved. She heard her sister mention it a few times. She said that they were all new. Chu Li had done a lot of good deeds. Now it seemed that they were really living well. Sitting in the Leisure Cloud pub, looking at the women, Chu Li thought of Chenning. He did not know how she was doing in Taihua Valley. She had used up all the concentration talismans. He should make another batch of concentration talismans and send them to her in the next 2 days. He wanted her to become a top-notch master as soon as possible. She could also help him. As the wedding approached, and he was about to enter the imperial residence of King An, Chu Li felt that he was short of manpower. Chu Li stayed here for the whole night. Duan Li Dao did not appear. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.